turn it on.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our county workshop on homelessness for 2023. I'm Carolyn Cummings, Vice Chair of the Leon County Commission. Our chair is here. He'll be in momentarily, but I would like to turn it over to our county administrator, Mr. Vince Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, I will hand it off to our Assistant County Administrator, Wanda Hunter, to introduce the item, as well as our many partners and collaborators around the table today. Wanda,
Thank you, Vince.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So today you will hear about homelessness in our community. You've received your workshop materials, and so today will be a summary of that information that was presented. So to get the elephant out of that's in the room, homelessness is not unique to Leon County. In fact, more than 500,000 people were reported as homeless just last year. That's the highest number of recorded history of homeless people in the United States, according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. In fact, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness calls this a nationwide crisis. The Department of Housing and Urban Development and other stakeholders, including many of those that are sitting around the table with us today, agree that there is no quick fix or silver bullet to address homelessness. But what you will hear today are recommendations that were developed in partnership and consultation with our local stakeholders. And these recommendations are also supported by the federal strategic plan to end homelessness. So with that in mind, we'll start our presentation with a brief introduction of our partners who are at the table with us today, which will be followed by Jonna Coleman, our Executive Director of the COC. And Jonna will speak to what exactly is homelessness, the COC's role and responsibility in coordinating our response in this community to homelessness. She'll talk about the local homeless data, which is our hit count, and highlight some of the services and programs that she is working on collectively with her partners, including Leon County. Finally, our own Shinkton Lammy will talk about some of the recent efforts of the county, the city, and other collaborative partners that address and align with the COC's strategic plan. And he'll also speak to the recommendations that I mentioned earlier. Again, just to reiterate, we have no quick fixes. You won't hear that today in today's workshop. But what you will hear are strategies that better position us and our partners to address the highest needs of the homeless in our community and that will help reduce homelessness. So with that, I'll ask our Assistant Sheriff Gilmore to kick us off with the introductions.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm on. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here to talk about what you've already heard from Wanda, that this is not unique to our community. And I want you to know today that the Sheriff, Walt McNeil, stands shoulder to shoulder with the county to help to address the issues that are happening here. So this is under my purview in law enforcement operations. And so I'm here from Leon County Sheriff's Office representing Sheriff Walt McNeil.
Good afternoon. My name is Mandy Bianchi. I'm the Executive Director of Ability First. We are a community-based nonprofit that provides services such as homeless street outreach and permanent supportive housing to persons with varying disabilities. Thank you for having us today.
Good afternoon. I'm Gwen Verostek. I'm with Capital City Youth Services. We work with homeless, runaway, abused, and neglected youth, as well as their families. Our goal is to strengthen those families, find solutions for those children, youth, and young adults. We provide emergency shelter, counseling, outreach services. We provide a drop-in center for daytime work with the homelessness teams, and we have a group home that shelters at-risk youth in our community. We also have just started providing transitional living for young adults and teenagers from 16 to 18. So thank you for having us and listening this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Emily Mitchum. I'm the Executive Director of Refuge House, and we provide emergency safe shelter and transitional housing for victims of domestic and sexual violence. We also have Carmela's Place at Refuge House, which is a standalone services opportunity for people who are exiting the sex trade. In addition to the housing that we offer, we do provide counseling, therapy, case management, advocacy, and injunction protection, as well as community education. And so, again, thanks so much for having us all here and learning a little bit about our services.
Good afternoon. I'm Shirley O'Rear. I'm with Brehan Family Services. Brehan House provides safe and secure housing for women that are homeless and pregnant. We also help them with access to educational opportunities, linkage to medical care, and referrals that lead to self-sufficiency. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tamika Fields, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Family Promise of the Big Bend, formerly known as the Big Bend Homeless Coalition. Family Promise provides a safety net for families and veterans in the Big Bend through street outreach, emergency shelter known as the Hope Community for families, and permanent supportive housing for families.
Good afternoon. My name is Vicki Butler. I'm the Director of Operations at CESC, the Kearney Center. The center provides 24-hour emergency services to individuals over 18 who are experiencing or on the verge of experiencing homelessness through our emergency shelter, street outreach, day center, and diversion services. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of this conversation today.
Good afternoon. I am Jonna Coleman. I am the Executive Director of Big Bend COC. So thank you all for having myself and our partners here. The COC is a HUD-mandated agency. We lead this regional area on the oversight of homeless planning and services throughout Leon County, Franklin, Gadsden, Jefferson, Liberty, Madison, Taylor, and Wakulla counties. Some of the functions that we cover are annual strategic planning of homeless services, leading us towards the goal of reducing homelessness. We do service provision, service coordination. We provide, we act as the lead agency for distributing competitive competitions for our local, state, and federal funding. We also conduct the annual point-in-time count. So HUD has 4 categories on how we would define someone as homeless. The first category, which we would consider literal homeless, would be someone who is residing in an emergency shelter or someone who is living in a place that is not meant for human habitation. So those people who are living outside or in cars would be considered unsheltered homeless, which does fit into that literal homeless category, along with those who are experiencing homelessness within the emergency shelter. We also have those individuals and families who are at imminent risk for homelessness, and that is a category where someone is at imminent risk of losing their housing within a matter of days. We also have those who are homeless under other federal statutes, which are unaccompanied youth, and some families that are designated homeless under other federal standards. And then there is those who are fleeing domestic violence situations. So those are the 4 categories of how we would address someone and define them as homeless. So each January, HUD actually has COCs across the nation conduct an annual census, which is what we call the point-in-time count. This year, we did see an increase in our overall unsheltered numbers from 2022. Those numbers overall do reflect back to what we saw pre-pandemic in 2020. However, there was a significant increase in unsheltered numbers. We do know this to be a national trend, that COCs around the nation saw an increase specifically in their unsheltered numbers. Here in the state, we did have we did see an increase in, here in Tallahassee, we did see an increase of 60% of our unsheltered numbers from 2022. And then just around the state, some examples of increases are Escambia County saw 102%, and then Hillsborough County also saw some double-digit increases as well, specifically in their unsheltered numbers. So while this is a federal or national crisis, we do know that some of the increases are really linked to the decrease in COVID dollars. Those dollars ended in 2022, as well as the ending of the eviction moratorium. And then we have also seen increases in eviction rates due to raises in rental costs, and then the lack of affordable housing units available in communities. So the COC uses our point-in-time data and other federal mandates, such as our HUD system performance measures, to really help us figure out how we could allocate dollars. And that is what is seen in our COC strategic plan that was adopted in 2021. I think that is it was included in your packet along with our action plan. So these act as the foundation for how the COC and our partner agencies look at accomplishing goals. So our priorities begin with wanting to reach functional zero for both veterans and chronic homelessness. And what functional zero means is that our community has the resources available should someone present as experiencing homelessness. We have those resources available to make their episode of homelessness rare and brief. We also use our strategic plan to strive to get us to a point where we can make sure that there's a location for families, to prioritize youth homelessness. And then some of our goals were to increase permanent housing for people with little to no income, as well as those who have barriers to housing, so such as those with extensive criminal backgrounds, as well as those who have poor credit histories. And also to figure out a way to diversify dollars so that we can bring more permanent housing programs and funding into our community. So through our funding sources, the COC, along with our partner agencies, do provide a variety of programs and services. So homeless prevention and diversion seek to prevent someone from becoming homeless. So those are two types of preventative services that our agencies provide. There is also street outreach. Street outreach is specifically a face-to-face contact that our street outreach advocates have. They are on the streets meeting people where they are. They are getting them resources and referrals that will help them move to the next phase. So whether that be entering into an emergency shelter or access to a permanent housing intervention, that is what those street outreach advocates do. Of course, everyone's probably heard of rapid rehousing, which means someone who is literally homeless. We want to rapidly get them connected to a program that will provide them with some short-term rental assistance and a housing opportunity so that they can sustain housing. So to kind of bring it all back together with permanent supportive housing, that is for those individuals who are chronically homeless, which means they've been homeless for longer than 365 days in the last 3 years, and they have a disability. So we look at providing longer-term subsidies matched with some long-term intensive case management to help those individuals. And we often see them graduate through from those permanent supportive housing programs through a housing choice voucher, which comes through the Tallahassee Housing Authority. And those will take away that long-term intensive case management, but leave them with a long-term rental subsidy. So with that, we have been able to fund several programs through our funding with the partnerships with the county, and I believe Shinkton will tell you about your investments.
Thank you, Jonna, and good afternoon, commissioners. Let me just take a moment of privilege to just say that I can't stress enough, commissioners, how important our partnership with the COC is in addressing homelessness. They are the custodians of the data. The data she shared earlier today, those are the data that they're collecting. They're the ones who run the system that can tell you the names, the age, the ailments of the homeless folks that are in the HMIS system that our providers around the table put into the system every single day. And they're coordinating resources and convening everyone on all things homelessness. And so that's why for the past 3 years, the county has worked with the COC to invest more than $32.5 million to prevent and reduce homelessness. This included preventing evictions and utility interruptions for more than 5,000 households, establishing the host deputies, and creating the street outreach teams, which engage unsheltered homeless individuals and families. Commissioners, prior to 2021, there was no street outreach team for adults here in our community. There was for youth, there was for veterans. That did not exist except for the county in partnership with the city, establishing it with based on the COC strategic plan and knowing what the needs of our community was for the time and continues to be. These actions and investments have been aligned with the COC strategic plan, which Jonna touched on, and part of that investment includes the nearly $6.3 million in ARPA funding that the county and city allocated in 2021 through the COC, as well as through the Community Human Service Partnership, or CHSP, when we established the homeless services category. And all of this was done in response to COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on our most vulnerable population, which is our homeless neighbors. So to date, with the ARPA funds, the results are in, and with those dollars so far, we're connecting and referring we've connected and referred more than 409 unsheltered homeless individuals to services including shelter, housing, VA benefits, also provided permanent housing to 51 formerly chronically homeless families or households. As John mentioned, what that means is that that's 51 households that prior to investment by ARPA dollars were homeless for more than a year or more with a disability. And then also helping more than 116 homeless individuals and families that are not residents of Leon County return to their community with bus tickets, car repairs, and any resources that they need to get back to their community of origin. In addition to the divestments, commissioners, the board has adopted strategic initiatives and bold goals that strengthen our partnership with the COC and the local providers you see around here at the table. That's better engaging the community and leveraging county funding to maximize resources that will ultimately reduce homelessness. Most recently, as you know, during the last budget workshop, the board directed that additional federal funding in the amount of $500,021 be included as part of this workshop item for consideration for further investments in homelessness, which I will touch on during the presentation of the recommendations in a few minutes. That all said, these efforts have not extinguished the challenges identified in the COC strategic plan and the consistent challenges communities all over the United States is grappling with. And those challenges include the increase on unsheltered homelessness as reflected in our local PIT count, insufficient funding for support to support emergency shelters, and the lack of affordable housing. These same challenges have been identified in plans like the Federal Strategic Plan to Prevent and End Homelessness, released in December by the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. Associated with those challenges are strategies formed with the combination of the federal plan as well as our local strategic plan for the COC to specifically increase housing and reduce homelessness. Those strategies, as you see on the screen, to address these challenges include enhancing public engagement, awareness and safety, strengthening the capacity of homeless service providers, and increasing the stock of affordable housing. There's 10 recommendations provided in your workshop item. They were developed based on these federally recognized strategies, as well as the COC strategic plan and the board's strategic initiatives and bold goals. The recommendations presented in the next few slides align with one of those 3 strategies you see up here. And so I'll start with the first strategy, commissioners, with the sets of recommendations. The next slide. Okay, there we go. So, commissioners, as I mentioned, all 10 recommendations are detailed in your item, and we're prepared to talk about all of them and answer any questions you may have for each. But as part of this presentation, I wanted to highlight just a few and then turn it over back to you for any questions you may have for me or anybody else here at the table. I'll start off with the first one on the slide regarding the community engagement liaison with this. The COC, as I mentioned earlier, does a great job in coordinating providers and engaging our homeless population. But they also recognize that, as do most homeless experts, that community education and understanding of the issue is critical to the success of reducing homelessness. If the community doesn't understand the extent of the problem, no one can solve the problem. There must be understanding of what the problem is and the scope of the problem. So, to enhance public engagement, the COC is recommending as part of this recommendation to establish a community engagement liaison that will meet regularly with neighborhoods, businesses, faith-based organizations, and other key stakeholders to respond to the problems at the street level and provide resources and insight on how the community can actively be part of the ongoing efforts to reduce homelessness. The liaison will serve as a link between the general public and homeless service providers to pour in resources when available and necessary to interrupt or reverse trends of homeless activities on the streets. The position will be critical to educating the community on what those resources are, the regulatory and fiscal limitations with addressing homelessness, and the opportunities that exist to confront this issue collectively and maximize the resources we have available to us. The other recommendation I want to turn your attention to is the consideration of the countywide ordinance to prohibit solicitation on the medians. There is a common misconception that the folks that's soliciting money along the roadways or panhandling in our community are homeless. That's not the case. Most are not. Many are transients or housed. However, panhandling is often linked to homelessness, and as a result, motorists give to individuals along the roadways, assuming that they're homeless. Based on calls, emails, and interactions that the street outreach teams, as well as the host deputies, have experienced, there has been a growing number of calls regarding solicitations on roads, on medians on the roads, and concerns for public safety. Currently, the county does not have an ordinance in place that prohibits the solicitation on the medians. A previous ordinance was repealed by the board in February 2022 because recent federal case law deemed it unconstitutional due to carve-outs for certain activities. And the federal ruling says we can't do that. Therefore, in order to better educate the public and promote public safety, an ordinance will be brought back to the board for its consideration to prohibit any form of solicitation on medians countywide for any reason. Any draft ordinance brought to the board would be reviewed by the county attorney's office to ensure that it is constitutional. The ordinance would not prohibit solicitation on panhandling on sidewalks that has already been deemed by Supreme Court to be protected speech. The focus of the ordinance will be solicitation on medians on the roadways. However, to reinforce the public awareness that panhandling and homelessness is not linked. It is not linked. A community campaign is also recommended as part of number 5 you see here on the screen, to install signs at medians on county roads that would discourage motorists from giving to panhandlers and instead donate it to the COC, bbcoc.org. The signs would be installed at medians known to have the highest frequency of panhandling, and the city also intends to install similar signs on their median, on their roads that would also provide an alternative way through the COC to give. Funds collected by the COC will be utilized to support the street outreach initiatives and services such as foods, clothes, and transportation. I'll move now to the second strategy of options of recommendations. Oh, thank you, Wanda. Okay, there we go. When it comes to the strategy of strengthening the capacity of homeless providers, I want to focus on the first 2 recommendations on the slide. Recommendation number 6 recommends allocating the $500,000 the board directed to be considered for today's workshop to expand services at our emergency homeless shelters to reduce unsheltered homelessness and loitering in the community. Simply said, commissioners, it's getting people off the street and connected to services through day services. Now, county, city, COC team, because I see some of our counterparts over at the city here this afternoon, we've held several meetings with the public regarding the impact of homelessness in the community, including neighborhood groups as well as business groups. The concerns largely center around loitering, littering, and overall public safety observed during the day and has been associated with unsheltered homelessness. Emergency shelters like the Carney Center, Hope, CCYS provide 24-hour services, including sleeping quarters, meals, showers, and case management that can reduce the length of time an individual or family remains homeless when you're able to make that connection, when you're able to foster that relationship. However, of course, due to insufficient funding, as we mentioned, that's a challenge for emergency shelters, which I'll touch some more on the next recommendation. Emergency shelters provide very limited day services at this moment. Day services such as classes and counseling. As a result, homeless individuals and families often congregate or loiter around high concentration, areas of high concentration for homeless activities such as North Monroe Street, downtown Tallahassee, and Pensacola Street. To address this issue and strengthen the capacity of the emergency shelters, a one-time grant process would be established utilizing those additional federal dollars, or what we call the consistency funds, to expand daily services at the shelters. What does that mean? It means providing meals, showers, storage space, and programming such as job training and mental health and substance abuse services, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It also means working with the street outreach teams and the host deputies to engage and transport individuals from encampments and areas of high concentration of homelessness and loitering to the shelters for meals, showers, and services. But it won't just be limited to the facilities at the shelters. The daily services that the shelters provide would also coordinate, collaborate, and also contract with local human service providers to allow unsheltered homeless individuals as well as the shelter clients to access senior services, self-sufficiency programs, life skill courses, and mental health and substance abuse sessions available throughout the day. Our 3 main shelters are on Pensacola Street or within a mile of Pensacola Street. And as part of the day services, what's going to be critical is active patrol within that corridor and connecting homeless individuals to those services that I just mentioned, so that way loitering and littering can be reduced within that corridor specifically. It's important that we're addressing those issues within the Pensacola corridor. This is just a preliminary task list developed in partnership with the COC and local homeless service providers to determine how we could best utilize these additional federal dollars to be immediate and impactful. As I mentioned earlier, the funds will be awarded through a grant process. Following the board's ratification of today's workshop in June, applications would be accepted for about 2 to 3 weeks, with detailed proposals being submitted by the providers on what services will be provided during the day for clienteles and unsheltered homelessness, as well as provide the strategy in which how they will engage and how they will connect with those who are facing unsheltered homelessness and reduce loitering. Applications and proposals will be reviewed by the county as well as the COC team, and subsequently awards would be made and contracted with the goal of launching these expanded services by the end of the summer. Want to really expedite this process and get this thing going. An oversight committee comprised of county staff, COC, as well as city staff would meet regularly with the shelters to ensure that the daily services are being provided and actually being accessed by unsheltered homeless individuals, and to also monitor any reductions in loitering and littering on Pensacola Street, North Monroe Street, and downtown Tallahassee. Again, our 3 major corridors where we see a high concentration of homelessness during the day. The 7th recommendation also focuses on strengthening the capacity of homeless providers, but again, specifically looking at our emergency homeless shelters. And that recommendation specifically talks about evaluating options for a dedicated line item funding for emergency shelters. The state provides very little funding for ongoing shelter operations. How much did they give, Jonna? $38,000 from the state. The feds give what, Jonna? None. No federal dollars for emergency operation shelters come through our community, through the COC. Locally, here in our community, the county, in partnership with the city, is providing $2 million through CHSP funding over the current 2-year funding cycle for our ongoing shelter operations. CHSP, for many of you, as many of you commissioners know, is a competitive grant process and the primary way the county and city fund human services, including shelters. But emergency shelters often share concerns about the insufficient level of funding they receive, and that results in significant budget deficits that they face, weekly. It's a weekly conversation that we have with the COC and with the emergency shelter providers that's impacting staffing, that's impacting case management, that's impacting other operations that they have. And of course, the COC strategic plan identifies increased funding for emergency shelters as an essential component to reducing homelessness in the community. Therefore, upon board approval today, options will be brought back in the fall that would evaluate establishing dedicated line item funding for emergency homeless shelters. Recommendations would be examined in partnership with the city, the COC, as well as the Children's Services Council, which has identified youth homelessness as one of its funding priorities. Dedicated line item funding would be very distinct from the current CHSP process, which is competitive and the emergency shelters currently participate in. In CHSP, the categories are broad, with agencies submitting proposed programs for funding. Dedicated line item funding would be contracted services with objectives, program criteria, performance metrics established by the county, as well as our partnering funding organizations. Additionally, as we've discussed with our partners, the dedicated line item funding would also bring greater oversight on the emergency shelters, so that way we can improve operations and better serve the homeless population. We'd also examine what other Florida communities are doing and how they're investing in emergency shelters operations at the local level. Again, options for dedicated line item funding as well as the appropriate level of funding will be brought back to the board in the fall for consideration as part of the FY25 budget process. So not this upcoming fiscal year, not FY24, but a couple of years. And this would, of course, coincide with the next 2-year funding cycle for CHSP. Finally, Commissioners, of the last 2 recommendations, I want to highlight number 10. When we talk about strategies, and we're talking about here with the increasing of the stock of affordable housing. And of course, that recommendation is to set aside units for households exiting homelessness. I can't stress enough how important affordable housing is to preventing and ending homelessness. Increasing the stock of affordable housing is identified as a priority, a goal, a strategy in every local, regional, state, federal, nationwide plans that you on homelessness. That is constantly, every time, brought up the need for more affordable housing for this specific population. For the past 2 years, the county has been very active in efforts to increase the stock of affordable housing, particularly for low-income households. In the past 2 years, the county has provided $4.3 million in direct funding and authorized more than $148 million in bond financing for the development and redevelopment of affordable housing projects that will result in more than 1,000 units over the next 12 to 18 months. Very excited about that, because it's a huge need in our community. However, these units will be targeted to low-income households, which can still be a financial challenge for this population. And typically, requirements for these units do make it a challenge when you talk about the issues about credit, background checks. And those are issues that are clearly are still become barriers for individuals and families that are exiting homelessness. At the state level, when affordable housing projects are seeking funding, they are required to set aside a portion of units for a special population. And they have the option. Special population can be farm workers, it can be youth exiting foster care, it could be individuals exiting homelessness. But it's an option that they have to pick. They don't have to pick homelessness, they can pick another one. What we would recommend is that when projects come before us, and we will have more projects come before us that's requesting direct funding from the county for affordable housing or bond authorization, is that the board consider a policy that we would bring back to require that any future projects that request county financial support set aside units for individuals and families that are exiting homelessness specifically. So that way we can build that stock of affordable housing for this population, because that will always be a barrier. As much focus and investment we want to put in our emergency shelters with case management and helping people get better, that barrier will still be there if there is no housing to place them in, either for permanent supportive housing, for transitional housing, rapid housing. The units must become available, and this is one of the steps in the right direction to make that happen through policies of the county. We would work with the COC as well as the Housing Finance Authority in developing the policy that we would bring back to the board. So the recommendations are packaged under 8 options in your workshop item, Commissioners. They aren't silver bullets. They won't solve our challenges overnight, but they do align with our ongoing and collective community efforts to reduce homelessness. They also represent more than $1 million of previously allocated county and city ARPA funding to both the COC as well as the Sheriff's Office, as well as the new county funding through the additional federal funds that would be invested over the next year. Should the board approve these recommendations, they won't be the last time that you see them. We will provide quarterly updates on the implementation of the recommendations, and when necessary, recommend when we should pivot if something isn't working and not as we plan, and provide additional recommendations of what to do from there. Commissioners, these are our recommendations for your consideration. And with that, Mr. Chairman, any one of us here today are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Commissioners, we'll go to discussion time. I think you can tell by the amount of folks in the room. I can tell you last time we had a workshop, we had this many folks in the room, that this is a very important issue, nor at the round table as well. So we'll take as much time as we need on this. The recommendation staff has made, we can take as a starting point. If there's some alterations or some additions we'd like to make to them, I think we have those discussions up here today. We discuss them and we come away agreeing on how we move forward so it can be ratified at the commission meeting. So I was, as I believe Commissioner Caban and Commissioner Welch were really hardcore on this issue, and so I want to let them lead off some of the discussion. I do have Commissioner Proctor in queue to speak. If you'd like to yield to Commissioner Proctor, you feel more than welcome to do that, but I do like to give credit where credit is due, and you guys have pushed pretty hard on this. So, since this is a workshop, Madam Attorney, does the same rule still apply in the fact that we need a motion prior to discussion?
Your board policy does not differentiate between a regular meeting and a workshop for purposes of the order of business. So Chair Cummings is correct that technically, according to your policy, you need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to waive the rules for this specific workshop on that matter.
Motion been made to waive the rules by Commissioner Minor, seconded by Commissioner Caban. Any objection? Seeing none, show it as approved. I'll go Commissioner Caban, Commissioner Welch, Commissioner Proctor, and then Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Minor, for making that motion. I think it's important today that I agree with you, Shankton. This isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all. This isn't going to be a silver bullet. I really do think that this is going to be a workshop where we know we all have to come together and provide input and then, make recommendations that we think is the best for our community. I know that we are here today to discuss homelessness, and I know this is technically a homelessness workshop, but I really do believe there's 2 points and 2 topics that we're really discussing today. I think one is public safety, and I think the other is homelessness. And though there are some crossovers, I don't believe personally that they are mutually exclusive. If you take a look at the goals that we provided from staff for 2021, and we're not really trending in the right direction. But this is an issue that is getting worse. It's going to continue to get worse. We know that Florida is a destination now more than ever. People are moving to Florida at an exponential rate. If you look at the local real estate market in Tallahassee, even with interest rates at decade-long highs, there really is a shortage of inventory. And with a shortage of inventory, rents are going to continue to increase. Property values are going to continue to increase. Insurance is through the roof in Florida. It's going to continue to get worse. It's not going anywhere. Cost of living has not changed. As we've seen, basic services, EMS, fire, we haven't funded those in a while, and we just did that in the last workshop. And so I think we really need to look at an approach that's different than just staff recommendations. I think that we're going to talk about staff recommendations today, but I think there's a bigger picture that talks about land use and increasing density in the urban services area. We need to build more units. I live on a road just outside Griffin Heights. There's a storage unit literally across the street from my house on Buena Vista Drive. I could throw a rock at it, but my house is zoned R1, and so which means one house per parcel. And when we talk about needing more units, we should come together and we should really look at how are we going to increase density? How are we going to make in town, in the urban services area, how are we going to make policy that makes it easier for people to go up and build more units? I'm thankful that we're all here today to discuss this, and I know that amongst the 7 of us, we have some very intellectual and I think great leaders. And so I'm really looking forward to coming up with policy and a roadmap that benefits everybody in our community, residents, children, businesses, and also those who are experiencing homelessness. So So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll pass it to Commissioner Welch or Commissioner Proctor. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Welch, then Commissioner Proctor, and Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, and I want to thank everybody for being here and taking your time. So obviously, we got all the pros in the room, and that's a good start, okay? I also want to thank our staff for putting together this workshop, Shington and Wanda. The recommendations, I think, are good, step in the right direction, as we talked about yesterday in our briefing. I do have a few questions that I think might help me understand a little bit better exactly the scope of the problem. Specifically, when we look at the pit count numbers, do you know how many of those apply to Leon County? And it's not just Leon County, right? The 800?
Correct. About 95% of that number comes directly from Leon County, Tallahassee.
So we're looking at 710?
I believe the number was somewhere around 720.
720 of those are in Leon County. Thank you. And then can you explain to me the difference between unsheltered versus chronically homeless?
Yes, so unsheltered is simply where someone is sleeping. So they are sleeping in an outside situation. They are under a bridge. They are in a car. They are not in an emergency shelter. So those would be considered unsheltered. Someone who is chronically homeless can be literally homeless, which means they can be unsheltered or in an emergency shelter, but they have been in that situation for longer than a year, specifically more than 365 days continuously in a year, within the last 3 years, a little bit of specifics there, or they've had 4 or more episodes of homelessness that equal 365 days in the last 3 years. So those individuals paired with a disability would be considered chronically homeless. So someone who is unsheltered can be also chronically homeless.
And we've seen a 60% increase in the unsheltered population?
That is, there was a 60% increase in unsheltered homelessness.
Yeah. Okay, so that is important, and I agree with Commissioner Caban. I mean, it's a complicated problem, as we have discussed. Seeing all these people in the audience, again, to the chairman's point, it's a very important issue to a lot of different stakeholders, and I think there's some very important things in these recommendations that I want to point out that I am encouraged by to my colleagues. I think that recognizing that the COC is designated by the federal government and the state government to deal with these issues specifically, I think that's very interesting in light of the fact that Shington pointed out that we get very little funding from the federal and state government to deal with this problem. I think that's worthy of saying. In regards to staff recommendation for the COC engagement liaison, one of the issues that was brought to my attention by some of our folks, some of our business community and our downtown folks who deal with this stuff is response time. Whether we're talking about our host deputies taking 24 hours to deal with an issue that somebody's dealing with downtown that somebody reports, can we expect that the COC engagement liaison will be able to facilitate a quicker response time? It would be nice if there was a point of contact that our businesses and our community can call and say, I've got somebody sleeping on my steps, I've got somebody defecating in my alleyway, can we deal with them immediately? And I know that with the outreach teams, whenever I have issues in my district, I can contact the county administrator, and the outreach teams are pretty quick to respond. I've had several anecdotal instances, women with children panhandling at intersections. Obviously, that sends up some big red flags, and we respond very quickly. And in that instance, we found out that person, like you said, was not homeless.
Right.
But the important point I want to is response time. Are we going to be able to increase our response times so that we can give our business owners and our stakeholders some level of comfort with trying to alleviate some problems quickly?
Yes, because right now, as you mentioned, Commissioner, what happens is that you receive an email, you get it to the county administrator gets it to us, we get it to the street outreach team and the host deputies, and then it's addressed. But when you have an individual day in, day out, this is what they do, engaging with the general public, that's key. And not just responding to immediate issues that's on the street level, but also being a convener of the public businesses, neighborhoods, faith-based organizations around this conversation, discussion about homelessness, but also being able to have the knowledge to speak eloquently about what the issues are, what our limitations are, what our resources are, what our opportunities are. I think is going to be critical and be helped with this position.
Thank you.
And John probably would have said the same thing.
I think that it is, I think in regards to the ordinance that we're potentially going to consider at some point, I think it's important to point out that that does not apply to sidewalks and that it applies to the medians. And I read in here clearly that the sidewalks are, freedom of speech issues. I think the most important, the biggest thing that stands out to me when we talk about the panhandling issue, which is a big deal, is people need to understand that the majority of folks panhandling are not homeless. They are transient, or they are, according to this, housed, right? And so that leads us to the fifth recommendation, which I think is a good recommendation for signs at the intersections. I think it's important on the public to hear this. I think it's important for the public to understand that, and this is where this is a great example of how complicated this issue is, right? Because you think you're doing good by giving money to somebody at an intersection when in fact our own providers in our nonprofit sector would tell us that that's typically not necessarily good, that those people might be using those funds for things other than what you think they're using them for, to maybe further some kind of issue. So I think that's a step in the right direction. I think that's a big, good step in the right direction. I think the fact that the city currently has an ordinance, Madam Attorney, that it says in here the city currently has an ordinance that deals with panhandling in the medians. Are they not enforcing that ordinance, or?
I do not know about the status of the city's enforcement of its ordinance. I'm not sure, and if they're not, I'm not sure why that might be the case.
Okay, I mean, it says in here they have a similar ordinance governing this, and then our ordinance would kind of oversee that at a county level, a countywide level. So just wanted to get that clarification. And then lastly, I wanted to speak on the affordable housing bit because I know that's really important too. When we talk about considering a policy to require affordable rental units to set aside units, how often do we have affordable requests for bonding or bonding assistance or any help from the county for affordable units? Like, how impactful will that
Recently has been every quarter.
So every quarter?
Yeah, we have one coming to you in June.
Okay, that's good. I mean, that's something that's important to know, right? That is something that happens fairly frequently, so we should be able to increase the number of affordable units if we go with option 10. And then it says over 3 years we've spent $32.5 million to prevent and reduce. Can you enumerate a little bit of that for me? I mean, has it been a lot of ARPA funding, federal funding that was because of COVID that went out?
It was ARPA dollars, it was ERA dollars that we put out there. It was also in 2020 Leon CARES dollars that we provide, as well as includes dollars for host deputies, dollars that we've invested into our shelters to help them prepare for COVID-19 and expand their resources during the pandemic. And so,
gotcha.
But primarily it's been homeless prevention, keeping people from experiencing homelessness. Now think about this: 5,000 people households were assisted with utility and rental assistance. That means 5,000 people did not get evicted in our community.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Yeah. I mean, when you look at that number, $32 million over 3 years, I didn't see anything in here that said, we saved 5,000 people from potentially being homeless, and I think that's an important thing to say. So I think all in all, again, I want to thank staff. I think that I repeatedly hear great things about our host deputies. I think it might be beneficial for us to consider potentially adding host deputies to the program. I think that the two we have may not be sufficient at this point, but if we're looking at funding mechanisms in the future and in future budget years, I think that's something to consider. I hear that great things from our host deputies, but I feel like they might be a little overwhelmed with only two of them dedicated to that. So all in all, when it comes to this issue, it is complicated. It is, as we talked about, a humanitarian issue. It's multifaceted. It's very difficult. It's hard for any entity, especially without any partnership from the state or federal government at a local level, to completely solve the problem. And so I want folks to understand that it didn't get here overnight, and we ain't gonna be able to fix it overnight. But I think if we take proactive steps and we convene a group like this, maybe more regularly than not, we can continue to work in that direction. So when it comes to the issue, I know it's a big deal for Commissioner Caban. I know it's a big deal for Commissioner Minor and to some extent Commissioner Proctor. So I trust they know what their constituents need, and I will follow their lead on that. So I will cut it off at that. Sorry for taking so long.
No problem. Commissioner Proctor, you're in queue. What I want to do, commissioners, is we're going to go through and everybody's going to have an opportunity to speak. After we have that opportunity to speak, then I would like for us to come to some kind of conclusion on what kind of motion we're going to have on the floor. And then after that, we can go into more discussion. So after every commissioner has an opportunity to speak, we go to a motion, and then we have more discussion. Commissioner Proctor, you're in queue.
Chairman, thank you. Washington committee, staff, thank you all for this deep look. Thank you for the recommendations that you've offered. And each of these recommendations is embraceable to me. But as Commissioner Caban has said, there's so much more. But to the extent that you have walked within your strides, we salute these very good options. And but there is more that we should do. I want to first say that commissioners, our staff has gave us some recommendations. They're all good. They don't go far enough. Some years ago, I think our county administrator can attest, I sought for the county commission to be humanitarian enough to dedicate 1% of Leon County's budget to the issue of homelessness. It still occurs to me, as Shinkton has pointed out, it ain't enough money go around. I still don't know what hindereth this body and the city of Tallahassee to isolate 1% of our respective budgets for this crisis. 1% of, I may be wrong, but I'm thinking the city's budget is around $1 billion or 900 million. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that the county's budget is somewhere around 300 million. But out of the the $1.2 billion that both governments have for a problem that languishes and captured in the narratives conveyed to us in this item, it is amazing that we are saying that over a 2-year period, Commissioner Welch, 2 years, we spent $2.3 million over 2 years. And in over 2 years, that meant that $2.6 billion was controlled by the city and the county. I don't know about y'all, but that's embarrassing. That's disturbing. That's disturbing. $2.6 billion by 2 governmental agencies that had the great big hearts to find $2.3 million for 2 years to cover homelessness for these CHSP, That's crazy. Now, if we're not going to dedicate a 1% goal and look at budgeting with 1%, a 0.5%, something fixed, this is just, we're not getting there. And for the city to have $900 to over $1 billion worth of money, our people's money, and can't isolate a fixed number of 1% or something of a percent, then I don't know why we go to church on Sunday morning. For when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was homeless, did you give me a roof? What? And we all supposed to be Christians. I don't get it. And as the policymakers, and as most of us Christian policymakers, hell, what would Jesus do? Would this be adequate to give as our testimony, the 7 of us, that we couldn't find 1% out of all our money? I think that included here ought to be a look at a fixed number that our county government is willing to put forward for humanity. I imagine that $22 million for a ballpark, or $18 million, or $12 million for a Northeast ballpark, that would be very good for the little kiddies. But hell, $2 million for everybody homeless ain't enough. That's the first point. Secondly, Shinkton, I want to thank you for the Biden-Harris report, the all-in report that you've given to us. And it makes some things very clear that homelessness is basically, it's a colored people's experience. I see, and she was here 2-3 Saturdays ago, and some of our commissions saw the Secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudge, and much of the message that President Biden shares here in his December 1922 message, she said some of those things. But what is made clear in the Executive Director's report representing the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, his words are very, very clear that people in particular reflecting the compounding effects of racial discrimination in housing, employment, health care, and education that persists to this day. This is disproportionately true for people of color. That's the first thing in the paragraph. This is still a colored people problem. Now, I have said previously, Commissioner Welch, you thought it was a dumb idea. I don't understand why the federal government property is so holy that the only people that can live on federal government property is Indians. How come? How come white people can't live on federal property? How come poor black homeless people can't live on the federal property? How come Indians is the only people the feds will let live on their property? I say to us, we got federal property in this county, and we need 1,500 of them acres for a homelessness, for everything, home for, and all of this stuff that's being kept. That right there needs to come. Shinkton, you told us that we got $38,000 from the state for the emergency effort from homelessness, and we got zero money. So all these words put together in here, including the $235 billion for the affordable housing efforts that's captured here, and we got zero. If the federal government ain't got no money, give us the dirt. Give us the dirt so that all of the rest of us is not discriminated from living on property owned by the federal government, except Native Americans. Something is warped in this. We need it. People need somewhere to go. And they got thousands of acres sitting out there looking pretty. I ain't never got a report on what they're going to do, what the future holds, what they're planning for, how many bears in the wood, any crickets over there. Nothing. They just sitting on it. And we need people in our community to get relief. And all of these big old words by this administration, give us the property and give us a chance. And we put a percentage set and fixed from this government because it's going to be on us. They ain't going to give us $1. State show ain't going to give us nothing. It's up to us. But that's one of the measures in which one commissioner sees. Now we got people homeless living out there already. No bathroom, no running water, no sewer. Hell, they out there. They out there already. They're already living in there. Ain't official. It ain't what humanity in 21st century is about. I think we need to make that push. We just need to be crazy as hell, as dumb as it sounds, Commissioner Welch. Let's be dumb as the problem is. This problem needs somebody to just go off and get ballistic and be dumb about it. Because it's dumb that we are putting 2.3 million, and then we got the Chamber of Commerce in here today. This is a big issue for downtown. And these kinds of issues, the needle does not move if middle-class white folk are not involved. I'm glad that this letter from, I shared with you the letter from Presbyterian Church community. They make awesome recommendations. We have letters from the Tallahassee downtown, concerned about public safety, mental health, and cleanliness issues and matters that they brought forward. I think that this is very, very good. And it's when middle-class white people get concerned about the problems of the poor that the needle moves. That's why we got the CSC in place, the needle move. We need for the needle to move. And we need for a problem affecting what the bigs in the United States government is basically largely and in many ways inclusive of a lot of folk, but predominantly a colored people's problem and a people of color problem. We don't get no help unless middle-class white folks are involved and get behind it. I want to also offer, Mr. Chairman, coming from Presbyterian Church, Ms. Gibson sent these words right here that I sent to you. And I think that these recommendations of a task force to be drafted, developing a 10-year plan for dealing with homelessness, complete with specific services and programs targeted for given years in the plan, is excellent. I like to include that if in the motion or whatever. And all of these elements that have been targeted, I offer this whole sheet of paper to expand the conversation. And I think that we're so early in this look that we are laying more ideas on the table and we're not constricting ideas and excluding them from the table. So I'm asking commissioners if we could adopt these words concomitantly with those words in the recommendations coming from our staff. My first round of comments, Ms. Chair, I share and listen to other commissioners. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Minor, Madam Vice Chair, and Commissioner O'Keefe. Give me a second just to make a comment. I think, and this is more of a perspective thing that I'm going to make more so than a generalized comment. I'll make that later on. But a large part of the businesses that we have in here and the constituents that we have in here and the calls that we get come from those much more in the urban core. I think this is a thing that not just the county has to tackle. I think this is a joint problem that we have to deal with the city as well. When you were talking about response time, who was that? Commissioner Welch. You were talking about response time. A lot of times those responding, if I'm not mistaken, would be TPD or maybe sometime the sheriff, because we have. But talk to me a little bit about when we talk about the response time. When somebody gets a call, who responds?
The responses regarding homelessness is our host deputies and our street outreach teams.
Okay.
They're the ones who are responding. If there's an issue regarding mental health, the city has a teams unit that also responds as part of that component. And so that's the way the collaboration happens right now in addressing issues of homelessness in our community.
My point is that this is much more of an urban issue that we're stepping into. And I think that we have to really think about how do we engage the city. And we all get on this page. I think we've had a few affordable housing workshops, but when it comes to that, we're joint. But when it comes to homelessness, where do we move in that direction? When you're talking about that 1%, Commissioner Proctor, I think allocating more money could be a answer if we're able to put measurables by which we would like to see that money be measured to say that we're successful, right? But I think it's not just us. I think we also go across the street and ask they too, because you said 2.6 billion.
2.3.
2.3.
That's what you said, Shankton. 2.3. The report tells us $2.3 million sent through CHSP.
Yes.
Over the last 2 years.
Right.
That's insufficient.
Right. So as we have this conversation, keep in concept the fact that from where I sit, it's a partnership between us and the city and all those folks out here to help us deal with this issue. There's no way we can solve it by ourselves. There's absolutely no way we can solve it by ourselves. With the help of you good folks out there, there's no way all of us in this room can solve it by ourselves. We're going to have to ask for help from across the street and even from the state to deal with an issue like this because it's so rampant. It's so huge, especially with the increase in housing and stuff like that. Commissioner Mann, I know
just
you
a clarification.
I got Commissioner Minor, and I kind of stepped in front of him a little bit.
Quick, because we talked about first respondent service providers. I requested data independently from LCSO, and just some information to share with everyone here and my colleagues. But TPD responds to, on average per month, 236 calls related to homelessness per month. EMS responds to an average of 50 calls per month, and LCSO responds to 120 calls per month. So combine those three. TFD, they had none reported, but I mean, let's assume that they're in there as well. So combined, our first respondents are responding to roughly 400 calls per month, excluding the fire department. So.
Thank you. And let me also add that Commissioner Minor, I know you have spoken because your corridor experiences a lot of homelessness too. So I didn't mean to leave you out in that because you have spoken pretty highly on that too. Commissioner Minor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everyone at the round table here. You're doing incredible work. I know many of you just from my time working at the food bank, but also want to thank all the staff within the Big Bend COC and all the staff within the partners within the COC. You all do the work day in, day out. And like I said, I know many of you, you're good at what you do. The issue is that you don't have enough funding. That's really the big issue. I also want to thank the city of Tallahassee for putting in so much effort and funding to help out with the homelessness issue in conjunction with the county. Like Commissioner Maddox said, or Chairman Maddox, we need their help and partnership to make anything work regarding homelessness. I felt this is a good workshop for us to have. I think it's much better for us to kind of have a discourse among the 7 before we have a discourse with the 12. So I think this is going to be very helpful, but the city is going to be an integral partner for this, and I want to thank them for their help to date. Of course, I want to thank everybody here in the room. You all are just, as I think Chairman Maddox said, this is the biggest attendance we've had for a workshop in quite a long time, and it shows that this community really cares. If you look through the agenda item, there are a lot of good recommendations here, and there's, as usual, tremendous work from Shinkton and his team. There are 10 good recommendations in here, or actually 9, I think. I'll get to the other one in a second. When I first saw them, I thought, well, these are all moving in the right direction, but are they really going to have a big impact? Is it really going to be enough? The more you dive into these, the more that you see the potential is there. If you take a look specifically at number 6 and number 7, both of those recommendations are dealing with our emergency shelter operations and what we can do to increase capacity within our emergency shelters. Therein lies, I believe, the key toward our success. Are we going to be able to put enough resources into this community's emergency shelters to really move the needle, as Commissioner Proctor is asking about? Yes, we have affordable housing issues. That's a mandatory part of this. We need to create more housing to have more people housed. But a big part of this, of success in the short term, is going to be finding the funding, the right level of funding for our emergency shelter operations. Related to that, there are a couple of things here. There's no particular order that I wanted to kind of highlight. I want to thank Elizabeth Emanuel and the Downtown Improvement Authority for commissioning a survey, which is in our packets, that surveyed downtown businesses on the perceptions of homelessness. And there's one slide here that you can find in that packet where it talks about the level of confidence in being able to refer people that are on the street to resources that exist. And if you look at this, 64% of the people surveyed within the downtown area say that they have no confidence at all or very little confidence when it comes to being in a situation where they have someone on the street that they're with and they don't know where or how to help them. We have an agenda item here about the signs. I think it's very helpful for that. One thing I'd like to also see is perhaps our county government working in conjunction with the city on creating a series of PSAs where we could basically have a very quick 30-second, 1-minute PSA, a series of them, helping to increase public awareness on what we all can do to help folks that are on the street. I think that'd be really helpful, and I might include that in a motion later on. But some other communities have done that. I think it'd be a relatively inexpensive way for us to help the general public out there have a better understanding of what resources are out there and what we can do to help them. That's one. One thing that this agenda item I think is very comprehensive. It's well written, as always. Shinkton and his team do a great job, and I know that many of you at the round table had a lot of input on that. So thanks to all of you. One thing that I didn't see enough of was the issue of mental health. I think we all know inherently, mental health is a huge issue when it comes to helping many of the folks that are out on the street. We have to get creative about ways where we can maybe find efficiencies that can help as many people as possible. Right now, the Big Bend COC tries to work with folks that are on the street to set up appointments with, like, the Appalachian Center, for example, to set up health appointments where people can have some evaluations taking place and get the assistance that they need. Unfortunately, due to budgetary constraints, often these appointments are set up like weeks into the future, a month ahead. And the problem there is that folks that are on the street, they don't have an iPhone to keep that in that calendar appointment. They don't know where to go a month later. So there's a problem with that. One possible option for us is to actually work with the Appalachian Center, have a block of time, maybe 2 hours a week, 2 hours on a Friday afternoon, where our street outreach team and our deputies, our host deputies, can go out there and actually connect in real time with people that are on the street. The Big Bend Continuum of Care has 10 tablets right now. Let's help them fund some remote mobile Wi-Fi so that we can have actually telehealth appointments right there on the spot, right there, and help and get people some of the help that they need. There's some issues we need to work through. We need to make sure that they've got the access to privacy while they're having that telehealth conference, right? So we need to work through some of those hoops. But therein lies, I think, a creative way for us to efficiently, with very limited tax dollars, help the COC and the Appalachian Center and other mental health providers have that real-time appointment set up with people that are on the street. That way you don't need to try to track them down a month later and remind them about an appointment, or help get them a bus route to their appointment. That's one thing I'd like to have us take a look at. And Shinkton, my question for you is that, might that be in number 7 of the recommendations when we talk about the line item for emergency shelter operations?
Yes, Commissioners, that's something that we can look into, and we talk about the specific resources that emergency shelters can provide. But let me add one thing, and I may butcher this just a little bit, but I'll take a little bit of liberty. City, great partners. Let me just say that throughout all these issues. And when you talk about mental health, right now the city has in place, in partnership with Appalachian Center, resiliency hubs around the community. Doing just what you said. I think what's critical as we look at when I was talking about the fact is, if the shelters connecting clients to those resources are available, and capacity is not an issue. And so the idea is that, going back to what you mentioned, Commissioner, is that if we can get our providers the resource that they need, and then connect those clients to those resources that already exist, they're there. I think that's the best way to move forward, because that's where right now they are laser focused on addressing mental health at those resiliency hubs that's located. And I think there's like 3 of them.
And Shinkton, I'd also like Assistant Sheriff Gilmore to speak to the county's contribution for the sheriffs and their support of mental health units as well.
We do have a mental health team as well.
Hit that button for me. Thank you.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to do that. We do have a mental health team where the clinicians are actually riding with the deputies on the street, and they're working together. So you have the law enforcement presence, you have the clinician there, and so it's a holistic approach on the street. So they've been doing a very good job, and I applaud their efforts as well. So you do have both the city and the county out there working together, and they do work together. Both teams who work together are in these efforts. So,
on point, Commissioner Minor.
Yes, sir.
On point, sir. To your point, the data sharing by these agencies at some point there had been a discussion about they share the same data banks on persons on the street, this, and this. Has that come to fruition that the actual John Doe, 5'9", black male, live in Frenchtown? How much of that has come to a reality?
HMIS, yeah.
To your point in the context of what you were asking.
So we do have HMIS, which is the system, the data system that homeless service providers use. But we also have a by name list. So that by name list actually lists people by name or description, kind of location. So that is kind of ongoing. And we have what is called case conferencings. Depending on the housing intervention for that person, we have those by name lists in those case conferencings, and staff, the COC staff, as well as partner agencies, are able to place people in housing interventions by name.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're welcome, Commissioner Proctor. So the short answer is that type of function would fall within recommendation number 7 for the line item services for operations emergency shelters.
And as well as number 6, because so we won't have to delay it, right? So the idea, if the resources are there, utilizing the dollars that additional dollars the board is investing, now we can connect the existing resources to this clientele, this population.
Great. Thank you. If you don't mind, let me go ahead and finish my comments here real quick. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Caban. Thank you very much, Shington. I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we're at the point where maybe we can entertain a motion for the items. You want to go through all around? Okay, great. Regarding recommendation number 4, I've got an issue with the way that this is written up in number 4. This is about the medians, recommendation for an ordinance. I agree with Commissioner Caban. I think that the key issue here is really safety. That's how we need to look at this. In recent years, I think we've all seen an increase in the number of people in medians in Tallahassee and Leon County. And it often leads to people walking into the actual traffic. I'm really concerned about the safety to them as well as those that are in vehicles. And so I had a briefing with the county attorney this morning. I just wanted to ask her really quickly, in order for us to have an ordinance that would pertain to the safety of the use of the medians, is it your recommendation that we should justify that need for an ordinance by having some data about the safety issues on that and the traffic volumes?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. So I do think it's important to really understand and frame this particular issue, given the First Amendment implications of regulating medians for speech of any kind and all kinds. So just to take you back to our previous ordinance, it came up in the context of the homelessness agenda item last year because people were asking, hey, we have this ordinance on the books, why are we not enforcing it? And the answer to that was because it was unconstitutional given the Reed case the U.S. Supreme Court issued in 2015. So the board at that point decided not to move forward with anything because the host deputies and some other alternatives that the board wanted to explore, but they did go ahead and repeal that, as Shington mentioned earlier in the presentation. So we haven't had anything on the books, but people do, and they have associated, as again has been pointed out numerous times, homelessness with panhandling. And that's why it's included in your agenda materials today. But let's be very clear about this issue, because when I talk with people, and a number of you frame this as a bigger public safety issue. It's being discussed in this particular context because this is the topic, but this is not to address panhandling, okay? It's the public safety, it's the increased prevalence of people being in medians. Many of our medians are very narrow. They're concrete. They were not intended to be used as a public forum in this capacity, but they have been more increasingly utilized, and there is a concern about danger. Now, for any ordinance that the board would adopt to pass constitutional muster, it would have to be content neutral. So to be very clear with the board, what you would be regulating is speech of any kind in medians. Okay, not just panhandling, not targeting one type of speech, okay? The other issue is there has to be a really in-depth analysis of what those public safety concerns are. Does the data warrant regulation? And if so, it has to be narrowly tailored to fit whatever that public safety concern is, okay? Which is really going to require a lot of work on the part of staff to really dig into that, to bring you back something that we think is going to address that public safety concern, but also be legally permissible and pass constitutional muster. So if the board decides to move forward with option 4, naturally a part of that would be a deep dive into data associated with medians here, the use of medians, accident information, all of that stuff, for us to try to bring you back information about what we think would address your issues and still be legal.
Thank you very much.
Before you continue, Commissioner Myron, to that point, and I'll come right back to you. I think I've seen organizations do fundraisers where they stand on the side, being that median. I know of an example where a young lady was hit that was doing a fundraiser and lost life as a result of that. So I think it's a dual thing there. It's not just specifically to address homelessness. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I mean, this is a safety issue. This is a safety issue. And Matt had on just a second ago, I think a revised number 4, which actually talked about coming back with an ordinance, a draft ordinance, backed by supportive data related to anyone in a median other than for the purposes of getting across the street. So that I have maybe an old version or previous version of the agenda item, but I'd like to replace that older previous version of the agenda item with the one that Matt had up just a second ago that talked about really we need to have staff go back, get safety data, traffic volume data along some of our most heavily trafficked intersections, and then if the data supports it, come back with a draft ordinance with some options on how to regulate activities in the medians for uses other than just simply crossing the street. I think that's the most important approach. I think it addresses the main issue that we're trying to deal with here, which is safety in our intersections and medians. So I know it's too early for us to do a motion, but I wanted to make that point, and if I need to, I'll come back and I'll ask a substitute motion for such to clarify that piece. Because I do think, at least in the version of number 4 that I'm looking at now, we need to replace that with something different. And then finally, the last point I wanted to make, and I hope if no one's been paying attention to me now, I hope you'll pay attention from here on out. I probably know as much about the homelessness issue as anyone else here on the dais. I served as the CEO of a regional food bank for many years, working with 135 partners, churches and nonprofits that would provide food to people that in many cases were homeless. Also, I've participated in the point in time counts that the Big Bend COC has orchestrated. For those of you that are interested in learning more about this, volunteer next time. It's a really good way for you to speak directly with people that are struggling with homelessness, ask them questions for the survey, for the point in time count survey, and get a sense for what the real problem is. There are a lot of people out there that are really desperate, that are really struggling with no hope. Going through that point in time count as a volunteer, I thought was really helpful for me, understanding the situation on the ground. And then finally, I have the honor of serving as the County Commission's representative on the Big Bend COC. So I think I've got a good understanding, not as much as some of the people at this round table, but I think I've got a pretty good understanding of what's out there and what people are struggling with. And so I want to say the following. This is a very compassionate community. It's one of the things I love about living in Leon County. And I mean that. This community really cares. We want to help people who are struggling, but giving money to someone at an intersection may not be the best way. In many cases, the money isn't used to buy food or shelter. Many of these people struggle with substance addiction or mental health issues, and they don't have the tools to help themselves on their own. So I believe that the best, most effective way for concerned citizens to help the homeless is to donate to either the Big Bend Continuum of Care, a local food bank, or a local shelter. These organizations have talented, hardworking staff. I know many of them, it's true, who work very hard. They're doing incredible things on shoestring budgets. And so they can do much more to help the homeless if they receive more donations from the citizens, from the public. So please consider that. The best way to help the homeless as a citizen is to donate to the Big Bend COC or one of these other organizations that has very excellent staff working hard to help people get off the street and into permanent stable housing. So please consider that. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Vice Chair Cummings, Commissioner O'Keefe. I'll make my comments, and then Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Shankton, Ms. Hunter, and all of our service providers that do the tough work for our homeless. I want to thank the Big Bend Continuum of Care, Ms. Coleman, your presentation. We couldn't do it without our partners, without the partners in the community, and you guys do a tremendous job in servicing our homeless, but we know our homeless population didn't grow overnight, and we're not going to solve it overnight, but we've got to continue to work together. Great report. You guys have given us statistics. You've given us specific numbers. And it's sad, and I think most of us are really concerned about the plight of the homeless in the community. But it really pulls and tugs at my heartstrings when we consider that there are families with children that are homeless. And I was glad to see that one of the continuing goals of Big Bend COC is to make sure that families with children don't go unsheltered. And so my question is, first of all, as it relates to children and families that are unsheltered, and of course we know children can't learn, they can't concentrate, they can't go to school and be their best if they don't have hot meals, and number two, if they don't have a roof over their head, they're going from pillow to post. But do we have, I've got the number with the family, the number with the children, not sure what number of children is associated with families. Do we have any statistics on maybe a monthly basis or even an annual basis on how rapid we are able to service those families with children to get them in some stable housing?
We do have access to that data. I would just need to pull it for you.
Oh, okay. All right. Do we have an idea, Shankton, are the numbers staggering? I mean, we've got service providers, and I'm pretty sure that they do the best they can to address those issues in an immediate fashion.
Well, we were just talking about that before the start of the meeting, about the fact that that is a continuing issue. We do, when you look at that unsheltered homelessness, it is heartbreaking because a lot of it are families living in vehicles, not encampments. They're living in vehicles. They're finding parking lots that, with high levels of light and trying to be safe and remain in their vehicles. That said, the data that you see is reflected as point in time count. As John mentioned, I think we can try to extrapolate that a little bit more to determine how many of that is specifically families and or youth, because I think that's going to be something that's critical. But that's something that is a big issue because Family Promise will tell you right now. I mean, the whole community is full. It's full, and that's been the issue now for over a year now. And so that kind of shows you the issue that we have, especially when you look at families, especially families with young children, that is a significant need. And so when we look at how do we provide greater resources to them, and either through diversion, through rapid rehousing dollars coming from the state level, so that way we can quickly get them off the streets and into housing is critical.
Do we, if I can follow up,
yes, ma'am.
Do we have a goal, Mr. Shankton, when we have those situations with our families and our children to say, well, we're going to address this within so many hours, so many days? Do any of the service providers have that as part of their goal?
So oftentimes when we have a family, the providers around the room know they'll get a call We've called Brehan, we've called CCYS, we've called Refuge House. If someone is at Hope and we can't get them in, we're always trying to make those connections, specifically for families. I know that Hope Community also prioritizes families with infants versus families with older children. So we are always trying to figure out some type of way that we can house families more quickly. I will say that I do have our point in time numbers. So as far as I can give you children who are under 13 this year who are experiencing homelessness, we did have 144 children, and they could have been in households or with unaccompanied youth.
Yeah, I appreciate those numbers. I've got the numbers for the families too, but I guess I was trying to zero in on how long do they live in their cars? Do they live on the street on average? And if we try to prioritize with our service providers,
that's
services to those families that have children, infants, school-age children, it's just not a good situation.
Yeah, we would have to pull that. I would not want to give you a number just straight off, so we would have to pull that data.
Okay.
Get that data to you.
And so, Shinkton, one of the recommendations is asking for $500,000 for emergency type services. Is that one of the priorities, dealing with unsheltered families with children? If not, I would like for it to be.
That is specifically, well, during the day, most of the kids are at school, if they're in school, which is a good thing. The issue regarding unshelteredness and loitering is the concern that right now there is services for this population is seen as limited. Connecting them to those services has been a challenge for our providers. And so with these dollars, not only are they expanding services within their shelters, which I think is very, very critical, but it's also connecting them to resources that we have in the community. Like when I talk about some of the mental health resources that already exist, how do we get this population to that? Because this is typically the population that needs it the most, especially those kids. There's a lot of trauma when you're living in a shelter or you're living in a vehicle. So I think it's important that with these folks around the room are the first point of contact. They have to be, because they know how to address those situations. They've got skilled staff that trained staff that are trained in trauma-informed care. I mean, those are things that are going to be very essential, so that way they can provide the services that these individuals need. A lot of times, also, Commissioner, folks can be embarrassed. Even if Hope had space, they probably wouldn't go because they may be embarrassed. And the street outreach team will tell you that too. The host deputies will tell you that they'll run to folks and be like, I don't want my family to know that I'm living like this. But once you start building that rapport from the street outreach team is then linked to these guys. It's critical that's linked to these guys because you got to build that relationship so that way you get in a path for both mom, dad, and children to housing, permanent housing. That's the goal for everyone around here in the table and folks in the audience too, is getting this population into permanent housing.
Right, and I would just think that those living conditions for impressionable children could eventually, permeate into those adverse childhood experiences, that we call ACEs, that could clearly have a mental impact, adverse mental, on the children. So I would hope that some way in the contracting with the COC, with the service providers, that we would find a way to prioritize services.
And when we bring those options back regarding the long-term and dedicated line item funding for the emergency homeless shelters, I think what's going to be important to share is that we'll be doing it in lockstep and working with the CSC. We've had preliminary conversations with the executive director, Sika Rose Green, about opportunities where we can engage and expand our partnership in looking at specifically youth homelessness. And when you're now talking about youth homelessness, it's really family homelessness. And how do you address that unit of the family to address the youth? And so that will be part of the analysis when we bring that to you in the fall.
Awesome. I appreciate that because I do sit on the Children's Services Council, and we've got a great director, Ms. Sika Green, and I can assure you she's concerned, and as a council member, we would clearly be concerned about homelessness of our children, in the community. There's got to be a priority.
We meet every 2 weeks, and this always comes up.
Awesome. And so when you'll bring something back to the county that addresses that and establishes some type of liaison or partnership with the service providers as well as with the Children's Services Council in consultation. Okay, awesome. Another hat I wear is I sit on the board of the Downtown Improvement Authority, and we've got a great executive director, Ms. Elizabeth Emanuel, and I'm familiar with the survey that Commissioner Minor pointed out. We are concerned holistically about the downtown area, improving the downtown area, doing what we can to assist the merchants, the businesses in the downtown area. My office is somewhat in the downtown area, but I have had some adverse experiences with loitering on my property, with defecation on the property, and I know the merchants in the downtown area have experienced that as well. We've got our parks downtown, and there have been some concern about activity with the homeless population that's undesirable. So in looking at your recommendations, I think we all agree that some ordinance needs to be drafted from a health and safety standpoint, dealing with quote-unquote panhandling in the streets. But I do believe that we need to elevate that discussion to address some of the loitering, the defecation, and this cannot be healthy for the community. Now, I do recognize that last year the ordinance came to us, and most of the commissioners, including myself, we're not concerned with criminalizing the behavior of the homeless, and I think that's where we were stuck. We didn't pass anything, but I think at this juncture, it's not getting any better. Sitting on the Downtown Improvement Authority Board, from time to time, those issues come up. And if we don't do something from the county level with some type ordinance to address that adverse behavior, then our downtown, it's not going to be the area where people will want to go and walk in the park and just enjoy the new businesses and hotels that are downtown. Let's face it, downtown Tallahassee has built up, is thriving with Cascade Park and all the amenities. So I believe, commissioners, that at some point, we've been kicking the can down the road, but at some point we have got to address from a health and safety standpoint, and I know our county attorney says that it would be supportive if we had some statistics to support ordinances that we pass. But I think in a civilized society, we have got to try to elevate our living standards, the living standards of everybody around us. And in addition to your recommendation, I just believe that we need to address it again. It's not going away. Mm-hmm. We might have an ordinance that's presented by legal staff or by you all that we might vote down or we might be able to modify, but we've got to address it. We cannot ignore it. So I certainly support that particular recommendation in addition to us looking a little further at addressing the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And just face it, defecation, urination in public, it's not safe. Okay, with COVID, the last 2-3 years, and other diseases of the exposure, we want to make sure that Tallahassee is as safe as it can be. So, commissioners, I just believe at some point we need staff to address that and let us take a deep dive with it, because it's not getting.
Yeah, and I'll add, Commissioners, as you know, one of your strategic initiatives is looking at working with the COC on the development of these corridor plans in those areas that we've identified as the areas of highest concentration of homelessness in some of these issues. North Monroe Street, downtown Tallahassee, Pensacola Street. I think those are vital as we work through those processes and identifying what are those specific, unique homelessness issues in those areas and how do we address them. Two ways, of course, primarily that we've done it, of course, is greater engagement. In the downtown area, actually, it was last month or a couple of months ago, there was a high concentration of resources put during an entire week of street outreach and host deputies going into that area and engaging the homeless individuals in the area. The missing link will always be someone that's also talking to the businesses and to the churches. I mean, that's where the liaison comes in, because that's got to be key. They've got to know these things are happening. We knew it was happening. COC knew it was happening. Our partners knew it was happening. They didn't know it was happening because that their specific goals for the host deputies and the street outreach teams is to connect with the homeless population. But when we start looking at the, further development of these corridor plans and seeing what are those things that we have to do and what times too? Every time is different, right? For downtown area, working with Elizabeth, it's not, probably 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's more like early in the morning or later in the afternoon when during the afternoon rush hour. Those are unique to that area. For Pensacola, it'll be different. And for North Monroe, it'll be different. And so identifying those are key. And so working with the COC, the city, the providers, those corridor plans will identify what those are. And that's how resources will be implemented in those areas.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I certainly appreciate Sheriff McNeil and the host and the host committee that we have for all the work that they have been doing as well. And the sheriff was one of the individuals at our meeting when we were trying to decide on the ordinance dealing with loitering and defecation and what have you. And he asked us as a commission to give him and his deputies an opportunity, and they would bring us a report back, and they would touch base and be specific in numbers about our homeless. And they've done that. They have engaged the homeless. They have directed the homeless to different service providers, and we appreciate that. And that service is ongoing, but it's just gonna take all of us. It's a major problem, and like Ms. Coleman said, the analysis statistics show that there are 500,000 homeless people in this country. 500,000. And I think I indicated to the commission that I was able to visit a homeless area in Los Angeles last summer. I mean, compared to what we have in Tallahassee, our problem is a small piece of cake. I mean, there were blocks and blocks, endless blocks, continuous blocks of homelessness downtown Los Angeles. Huts, they're little, I guess you wouldn't call it, they're tents. The homeless, and you saw children running in and out of those tents. So thank God we're a small city. compared to Los Angeles, with all of our great service providers and our citizens that are concerned about the homeless. We care about the homeless under the leadership of Shington and Ms. Hunter, our county administrator. We can do this. We can attack the problem, we can address the problem, and we can resolve the problem. So I can't thank the service providers enough, because you wouldn't be in this business if you didn't care. You care, and we care as well. And I support your recommendations, like Commissioner Minor. There might be some additions to the recommendation that you guys have done a real job to tackle a massive problem. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to thank all the service providers, and I know that I hope you'll pass on to your teams of staff and volunteer that aren't in the circle in front of us how much I know we appreciate this work. This is a huge issue, and I agree, which is what's said before, is something like 1% would be a totally reasonable amount of resources to put to this, partly because if you look at our email in my email inbox, and if you look at the news, and if you look at what people talk about, the problem feels like a lot more than 1% of what's going on in our community. And so I just want to thank you and acknowledge that the work you do, sometimes you get associated with some of the community problems with homelessness being here, and at least I want you to know that I know and appreciate that you are there helping. So thank you. This report in many ways has indicated that it's another example of something that when the COVID emergency happened and ARPA and ERA funds come down, we looked at different ways to do things and we realized, oh, this is how we should be doing it permanently. For example, street outreach, as was mentioned by Shington. Before we had street outreach folks, but they only outreach to youth and veterans. And now we have street outreach, both service provider outreach and sheriff host deputies that reach out to everyone. And because of that, we have specific numbers. And so I appreciate that. I have a few specific questions before other comments and things. On the topic of children and families, and my questions are being educated by this extensive report, the strategy you provided, and the federal strategy, as well as input from other community partners. It was noted from Legal Services in North Florida that they find that a lot of families they work with do not reach out for support because they're afraid they will lose their children to the dependent care system if some agencies are mandatory reporters, if there's evidence of neglect or abuse or maltreated. And that's not saying someone's homeless abuses their kids, but many could argue that not providing resources necessary is neglect. And so can whoever is best suited, tell me a little bit about how that is addressed and if that is something that community education helps to let people know that there is a way to get help without risking losing your children.
So yes, so some of our providers are mandated to report, but we have found that our interactions with DCF ranges from just conversations to support, and I believe that family unification is the first and foremost for any of our providers and our agencies. And if a household or parents are trying to do their best, we are definitely not in the business of splitting families up. We often try to, even through if we can get families into CESC and if we can get children into CCYS, we will do that. And DCF caseworkers normally will work with us. We have brought DCF out to, our host deputies have brought DCF out to camps, and there have just been recommendations, and we've tried to find some solution for them. So I think as far as education goes, is knowing that when you reach out for services, that shows us that you are caring, that you do want to see your family in a better situation. And so we are a lot more flexible in working with those households. It's just when that level of neglect is harming the children that we'll need to take that action. So we do tell families that.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Thank you. The other thing that informed my questions here is a recent report that was provided by the Sheriff's Office on the host deputy 6-month update. And if anyone here is interested, if you didn't mistakenly come here for a movie or something, I suggest you take a look at that. And I want to give credit to the host deputies for doing impressive work building trust with this community and identifying specific things that we are seeing because, and I'll come back to that. The other thing in this report from the federal report that is clear is, and you can see it with federal funding priorities only going to permanent supportive housing is, homelessness is caused systemically by not having enough affordable housing. However, as we are being educated on by the experts, once someone falls into homelessness, the correction to get them back in is extremely complicated and takes individualized responses. But I firmly believe that, and I think evidence bears out, and I'm looking forward to our experience bearing out over the next few years, that the money we invest in interventions and specifically ultimately permanent housing will be we will save money overall on our other areas of community impacts. And so while this report, the numbers are much smaller than I would like to see, what I appreciate about this report is that it starts what we can do immediately. And my hope is that we're going to have a year from now an evidence where we say, wait a minute, we put in $500,000 and the number of people that we prevented from being in emergency housing or emergency shelters, temporary shelters, the detention center, in the criminal justice system, anything else, saved us $1 million. And we'll be able to come back here and say, all right, we're going to put in $1 million next year because we know we need to do this. And so I appreciate that's my pitch. The other thing is, and so, I could spend days talking about affordable housing, but this, I think what helps us contain this is about the immediate emergent, helping people who are currently homeless and preventing people from falling into homelessness. This is some just questions while I have you here. The report notes that housing vouchers expanded during the ARPA or area emergency, and the feds gave us an additional 66 housing vouchers that families or people are in permanent housing now. I read, I think that's coming to an end. Are those 66 people going to have to find something else, or is that somehow permanent?
So those individuals who are were housed through the housing vouchers that we got post-COVID those were short-term vouchers. So they were 18-month vouchers. So we are hoping that those vouchers will be transitioned into permanent vouchers for that set of 66 individuals.
Excellent, thank you. And then we note here that our cold shelter policy is a night we're expected to have 35 degree or below temperatures for more than a few hours. 36 degrees is pretty dang cold. 38, 39, and 40 is pretty dang cold. Is there a industry best practice or is that just what we've settled on as far as for cold night policy?
That was actually established, and I think it's captured in our comprehensive emergency management plan in consideration from the health department. Okay. That's how it was established to determine what the weather threshold should be to activate cold night shelter. And yeah, that's when it's considered life-threatening here in our community.
Okay. Shinkton, I know we have a lot of comments, but we could spend all day just saying thank you. However, I'll skip it. You know my sentiments. Yeah. You talked about issues regarding even with the new expected 1,000 affordable units coming on in the next 12 to 18 months, people who have evictions, poor credit, criminal history cannot access that. Another thing we talked about, we talked about, it's in here that I wanted to consider adding, and so I'm just mentioning it for later motion, is for families, one eviction is often enough to prevent them from getting new housing. And unlike in other localities, there is no process to expunge an eviction from your record in Leon County. And I would like us to analyze and pursue what authority the county has to create a process to have evictions expunged from a record. The other thing is, a lot of things relate to preventing eviction. One thing, when tenants get evicted, a lot of times all their belongings end up on the street and get thrown away, and all their papers get thrown away. And so there's all of a sudden this incredible burden to just try to get a driver's license. I mean, for people who are housed and have jobs and probably could even pay lawyers to do it. Think about if you lost your birth certificate and your Social Security card, but you're not homeless and have no money. And so anything we can do to help prevent it, which I know we are. One other thing we talk about is, we didn't talk about a lot, but foreclosures. We're going to see a lot of what we see, or at least in some of the input from Legal Services in North Florida, is that a lot of folks who end up facing foreclosure, falling behind payments, or even family members who own property falling behind because of tax deeds, losing a home over a few $1,000s, there's not a right to counsel for that. There's not a fund to that, and sometimes in preventable ways to help from losing their home. And so there are some municipalities that have funded a right to counsel for people who are facing foreclosure or eviction, and it's something that I want to pitch for consideration for us to ask council to bring back as something to consider here. And then, let's see here. This is a very comprehensive report, and aside from the host data, I don't see where we have a count of the number of permanent supportive housing units are in the county or the region for the COC, and what is the wait list for permanent supportive housing currently?
So right now we have 3 family programs and 4 individual programs. 3 family programs and 4. Yes, I am not sure of that total. It comes out on our homeless inventory chart, but I can send that chart to you.
Is there any rough number on the wait list? That's my biggest question. If I had a magic wand and a bunch of taxpayer money, how many permanent supportive? Did you just try to get a genie? Never mind. Make it happen. Sorry. Is there a wait list number, perhaps?
We do. Our family wait list, I believe the last time we had 32 families that was on that wait list, and it is well over 99 on our individual list.
Okay. And that lines up close enough with some of the county data. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then, talking about preserving I can't believe I skipped this. We have a landlord mitigation fund, and I wonder if it's something we can consider if landlords are unwilling or unlikely to take the risk on people who have an eviction or poor credit or a criminal offense. Can we consider using our landlord mitigation fund to say if a landlord will accept that risk, we'll underwrite a part of that risk with the landlord mitigation fund to say, you know what, if you accept these higher risk tenants that are otherwise excluded out, we will put a certain amount that if they leave or something like that, the risks that come from that history is something we could help. And likely we wouldn't have to intervene much, but we would hopefully give more tenants some underwriting to feel comfortable allowing people to live there.
That is exactly what the Landlord Risk Mitigation Fund does right now. It's set about $2,000 is provided for any lost rent, another $1,500 for or $1,000 or $1,500 for damages above or beyond any type of security deposit. The issue has been, Commissioner, is that and that program was established in partnership also with the city and the PSCC also, I'll share, is that the issue is the fact that it is a landlord market is what we entered. And when given the option, despite all of the different incentives, they had options, and the option was to go with the young kid coming from Orlando, whose parent is going to be, who's going to co-sign, versus the individual who our providers work with and utilize, who may have some criminal background, who may have some evictions on their record. They unfortunately have been at a disadvantage. Now, that being said, we have been talking very closely with the city about actually looking to see what we can do as far as increasing the incentives, because that's something we want to look into to try to get, especially as it comes down just a little bit as far as it being a landlord market, so that way we can get more of them to participate and open up their units for individuals who are experiencing homelessness and who may have some dings in the record.
Thank you. And there's not much we can do about the market. You know, there's not enough affordable housing. Hopefully, as we expand affordable housing, the supply and then the competitive advantage decreases for those landlords and they may participate again. Thank you. Did I see a number come by to Jonna?
Yes, so Abby just got me the numbers for the PSH. And so with families and individuals, there's a total of 305 units. And then also our HUD-VASH, which is permanent supportive housing specifically for veterans, we have 252.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see here. You know, I could talk for a while, but I'm not on this thing. But I want to mention, we have 1,000 units coming on, but we are stepping in from a deficit. We lost a lot of affordable and permanent supportive units over the past few years. Just for example, we lost the units in Orange Avenue temporarily until they come back, and that's like 200 people. We also lost stable affordable housing at the dwellings in Westgate, which are now operated by private management, and we're seeing a lot of evictions and different residency terms than they were placed there, being formerly homeless individuals. And also, we see a lot of mobile home parks being bought up by institutional firms, tripling, doubling rent. And I would like to have us consider, if we're talking about ordinances or protections or codes, I would like us to consider every creative option to protect those currently affordable units, not lose them to outside investment firms coming in and doubling and tripling rent. But I know there's private property rights, but I know how creative we can be when we're fighting for our people who need to have a place to live. And then, let's see here. It's already in the record, and it's been here, but I want to mention, you know, if we need more permanent supportive housing, you know, let's look at any empty or unused building that can be converted into something. Doesn't need to be perfect, it needs to be housing. And so I'd be a big supporter of that. And then, y'all, I know I can hear everyone wanting me to say finally, but we're almost there. And the reason Commissioner Proctor makes very good points, and he talks about now we're digging into it because middle-class white folks are affected by it. And he's right, because the expansion of the contraction of affordable housing is so significant that it's creating so much unaffordable housing that you can be a middle-class white family at this current time, like myself, and my friends and my family are experiencing and have experienced homelessness. And it's a shame that it's taken to that long to get here and talk about it, but we need to be here talking about it and to fix it. And what I would like to see, I think about it is, we look at the host numbers, and I've just been waiting to get into my spreadsheet about this, just to highlight some of the specific numbers we see from them are of 271 individuals they contacted, 230 were open to getting support, getting housing. 41, we provide transport back to where they're from, or family, a bus ticket out of town, which is one thing. 168 referred to housing services. Only 15 have been provided permanent housing. And that's not a fault on our permanent housing providers or the deputies. That's a fault on the market and system that we haven't put those units in place. And that means 153 are waiting. What would it cost for 153 permanent housing units to wipe out that list and not have to worry about services and emergency sheltering that often costs 2 to 3 times what permanent supportive housing costs? So, do not worry, I will not move for adding $5 million to this, but I just wanted to point that out, that it takes money, and that it's money well spent, not only because it's the right way to treat our neighbors, but because it will pay back dividends. And, you know, I'll just leave it with, finally, I will just leave it with talking about, you know, one of these suggestions. You know, the host deputy program and the street outreach, I thought that was created to get people off the street. But actually what I read in the report, it was created to respond to the nuisance issues. It was created specifically to work with, at least in this report, businesses, neighborhoods, and community areas that had complaints about these public nuisances. And what they've been doing is we talk about we need meetings with businesses and communities. They've held over 50 meetings educating and connecting with businesses, neighborhoods, and community groups in addition to their homeless outreach. And what they're doing is, instead of just saying, oh, let's, I don't know, print out a bajillion Greyhound bus tickets or throw everyone in jail, they're doing what works, and it's finding out when people need to get them off the street. And some of the specific things they highlight in their report that I wanted to mention is challenges, public urination and defecation. They get called out, and by knowing what's going on, they specify in their suggestions that they can suggest where public facilities should be created. They also talk about lack of, they would really like to see, they were all housed in one area, and complaints came from the main library about the number of homeless people. So they moved their offices there to address those issues. And so I really appreciate that while that's not where I came, while my main issues coming to this was just finding houses for people to live in, I really appreciate how much of the effort of the county and the locality of the last few years is in response to the business community and the neighborhood community to address their concerns. And so I appreciate it, whatever it takes to get to helping people. And then Commissioner Welch talked about perhaps adding another host deputy. I think that's a great idea. Mine would be just a little different in that we talk about adding this community outreach position in one of the recommendations. And that's someone who communities, that's meant to be outward to the community, to neighborhoods, to businesses, which is something host does partially, and which is something that can be helpful. But one of the comments and challenges in the host report was that they're not the only outreach workers. We have outreach workers from these organizations that go with them, that feel more safe because of them. And what the report says is they would like to see full-time outreach or more full-time outreach because there are often not available or enough outreach people to go with host deputies to address these issues. And so I'd like us, and I'd like feedback, I'd like to consider if we're creating a new position, is it more impactful to create more outreach direct positions to fill a gap where sometimes they're missing than the community outreach? And with that, I'll just leave that when it comes to the ordinance, which is probably the hot topic today, I'll just say that in general, I'm against it, but we'll get into that, and I just appreciate taking all the time and everyone's patience.
Just take one more finally. One more finally.
And finally, I want the record to show that I acknowledge Commissioner Proctor was right 3 times this meeting. I'll pass. Thank you.
That
was real good.
All right. I'll just add to that one comment the commissioner made at the end to say that the extending of the contract with the COC for the dollars for the street outreach team does contemplate an additional position.
Excellent. Thank you. I knew you had the answer.
All right. I'll be quick. So my comment earlier about the city did not say they didn't do anything. I think the city has done a lot of work towards it. I think we need to continue to work together on this issue along with you all. We did have a joint workshop a while back. Shankton, can you speak real quickly to how much or how many of the things that we talked about during that joint workshop have we completed or are actively doing?
It was at that joint workshop, Commissioner, and this was back in the summer of 2021 when the dollars were allocated, the $6.3 million were allocated for of county and city ARPA dollars for homelessness. Portion of the dollars went to the COC, and that's what's helped fund the street outreach teams. Also provided permanent supportive housing, as well as other programming that the COC provides. But it also established the homeless service category through CHSP, which the board approved. Following that, with ratification. With the ratification of that workshop, and then with those dollars now, they're also providing investments into the shelters, some more in permanent supportive housing, homeless prevention, diversion. These are the dollars that's being utilized right now to help with the operations of our shelters. These are the dollars that's also being utilized to get people who are not from our communities back to their home with bus tickets and car repairs. And so as part of this process, we build on that, right? We build on some of the actions that was taken by the joint county city workshop, build on that with these additional recommendations. by extending the contract with the COC, as well as looking at the dedicated line item funding, which would not be exclusive to the county, but would have to include our partners over at the city.
Good. Second thing, affordable housing. I've talked to people to say affordable housing, so affordable. When we talk about that number, what does that number look like in Leon County when we talk about affordable housing, as far as the value of a house?
Value of a house, I have
What's
to get back.
the average? I think it's like, you know what the average cost value is?
So right now, what we target for, at least for a low-income family, when they purchase a home, is a home at about $233,000. That's what's considered affordable, and because that's our focus. When we focus in our department of affordable housing, it's for low-income families. And so that's typically to go with the programs that we have in place, as well as when we're assisting people with down payment assistance. But something that's critical also of the need in our community, and I think Commissioner O'Keefe hit on it a little bit, is that we also need over 7,000 affordable units for families that earn 50% or less of the area median income. I mean, that is a huge need in our community. And we're working through that goal when we bring to you, commissioners, opportunities where we can provide direct funding or bond authorization for some of the projects that we work closely with the HFA as well as the city to bring before you for approval.
Cool. $233,000, folks, is what we consider affordable housing. I remember during campaign time, I was sitting in a forum and we were talking about a new development, and I was telling the folks there that in that development that about $200,000 was going to be the average cost of those houses, and the folks looked at me like I was crazy to say that was affordable, $200,000. Now we're talking about $233,000 with, you know,
The interest rate.
I think the problem there is that $233,000 probably should be affordable, but in order for it to be affordable, wages have to keep up with it. I appreciate the fact of what we're doing to try to bridge that gap, and there's things we can do and things we can't do. I think I was talking to Sue Dick the other day, and she was telling me, it was a while back, we were talking about it. We're talking about that threshold of like $17 an hour. We're talking about, she was telling me businesses these days, I mean, I was asking her, could they, you know, look at, you know, incentivizing or telling their businesses to look at even higher. I said that they're already doing that because the market is so competitive when it comes to workers. If we're talking about $17 an hour, they're having to go 18, 19, just to get people interested in working. But even at that 18 and 19, are we still at the point of being able to say I can afford a home that's $233,000? I don't have the answer for that one. I just think we have to consider the fact that when we're talking about homelessness and we're looking at affordable housing, $233,000 in any market is a lot of money for someone with 2 or 3 kids, you know, trying to find a place to call their own. And then when you compare that with the fact of rental costs is just through the roof. I mean, again, I don't have an answer for these questions. And if any of you do out there, I mean, let me know. But I think we have to really, if we're going to have this conversation, we have to be real blunt, honest, and about the things we can do, the things the questions we can answer, and the ones that we can't, and what we're really facing when it comes to dealing with homelessness and affordable housing. So we'll continue to work on it. But I don't, and I may have brought up a point that may dampen the efforts that we're trying to make, which that's not my point at all. It's just more of, I really want us to look at this thing with a realistic eye of what we're dealing with. The mental health issue that Commissioner Minor brought up, I thought was something that I thought I didn't see a lot of, but you guys addressed it through some of the things that you talked about. We have to continue to work on that. Hand in hand with that, I'm wondering, because one of the other things I heard when I was on the campaign trail was refusal of services. How many of those homeless folks out there wants to be in the situation they want to be in and don't want services? They don't want to be sheltered. They would rather live in the woods and encampments, let's say because of a mental health issue or because they're former military, whatever the case may be. What percentage of those folks, of the folks that we're talking about, 721, fall within that realm? And then what do we do about them? And how do we provide some kind of service or some kind of campground or something for them? So we're about, because I've gotten calls where business owner has said they're camping on my business lot or right behind my business, and I would like to see them gone. And I'm I've also heard that folks have gone out there and offered those services, and they said that they didn't want them. They would rather camp. They would rather be out there, and they're very comfortable in that setting. So again, a question that, or a situation that probably doesn't have an answer here, but I think we have to consider those things when we're talking about that 721 number. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, two things I think to respond to both things you mentioned, Commissioner. One, and it's important for the business community to know, for the community to know, if someone's on your property and you don't want them there, they will be removed if you call law enforcement. I mean, that's key. If you don't want them there. Now, the other issue regarding folks refusing services, yes, that is something that the host deputies and street outreach team see all the time. That initial contact usually is not, yes, give me what you have. It's no, go away, I'm fine. That's usually what it is, but it's fostering that relationship. I know it's hard to hear a lot of times, but it's patience. It's patience with this population, because you're dealing with 30, 40, 50, 60 years of trauma.
Right.
And you, as this perfect stranger, be it in, sheriff's uniform or as members of our street outreach team, it's not going to change overnight. But as those relationships build, they are more likely to take services and accept services. But one thing though is clear though, that all the street outreach team members do it, and the host deputies do, is that if someone does not want a private business, a private individual does not want someone on their property, that information will be communicated to that individual and let them know that they must move.
Understood. Thank you. That helps the legal side of it, but that refusal of services thing, I think we really got to think about, because there's a lot, from what I understand, there's a good number, and Sheriff, you may be able to speak to this, of our homeless folks that are in that situation where the rapport hadn't been built to a point they're really ready to accept those services. So we have to consider that too. We talked about building that rapport. One thing that I was thinking about was, and this is, there was a time when there was mental wars, and there was a specific focus on it. When it went away, homelessness probably became more of an issue. Is there any contemplation of a group housing for homeless persons with mental health issues that is monitored by social workers, who will make sure that they continue to take their medications? Because even if you have those, let's say you have the mobile unit that does the sessions with the psychologist, and they make out a plan for the homeless person, they can go get those meds and still not take them, or take them for a little while and then stop. I think, from experience, I know that with a lot of those meds, you have to be on them on a constant basis for a while before it really starts to work. So a week's worth of medication is not going to get you where you're trying to go. So what do we do in those cases where again, I'm thinking more so, and I don't even know how we accomplish this. Again, I don't have the answers, but I have part solution here. But how do we get there in the homeless, like a group setting or group housing for homeless persons with mental health? And again, important that they be monitored by social workers, so they again continue to make sure that they're using their medication, and maybe incentivize them with an allowance. Not necessarily a rent, but just an allowance to them. They can, do specific things they may want to do with, whether it be buy food or buy special things like that. But we got to come up with a way to say, hey, take your medication, you get this in return. Because I don't think we can walk away from here thinking that just because you prescribe something to someone that they're going to take it, right? And one of the hesitancies, and I've experienced this in my own family, where, well, I don't want to take medication because of what it might do to me, the side effects that it may have, or even, what if I'm ready to stop early in the withdrawal symptoms and stuff like that. A lot of people are scared when it comes to mental health medications, and so there's a bunch of reasons there. Just the ultimate point when it comes down to it is there a place or a thought process there where we have that kind of place where folks can come, homeless folks can come, group home, that specifically are dealing with the mental health issues that need the constant monitoring to make sure if they're on their medications, continue to stay on them.
That's level 4, 5, 6, and 7 mental housing.
So Appalachia does have what's called FACT team housing, which is satellite housing that people can go to when they have significant mental health illnesses, where they can be monitored. Our agencies do their best to make sure that people in our permanent supportive housing programs have access to their medications, keep their appointments, and remain on their medication regimen. But again, like any other civilian who has mental health issues, it is often a hard task to keep them on their medication regimen. So I think that's something that we all struggle with, especially in permanent supportive housing, when we see someone doing so well, and then all of a sudden they will, miss a couple of doses, and now they're kind of having to restart. But that is where our programs are here to kind of catch them, which is why permanent supportive housing does work for individuals who have a long-term history of homelessness and that disability.
Right. So pairing those two, the homeless piece with the mental health piece specifically, and being able to have that housing, I think is a key point that keeps people in a position where they're getting the help that they need, and they're able to thrive after getting that help, and maybe even move on from that housing to other housing, and still be supported by a facility or by a professional that still stops by every now and then as they continue to graduate through the levels to make sure that they continue to take those meds and stuff like that. I think investing in something like that, especially when we talk about those who refuse services, a lot of times a refusal of services could be due to a mental health issue. If you can get them in a position in a home or a group setting where they're there every day and you're making sure that they're getting the things that they need in the way of counseling and services and medication, you get them to a place, you can maybe graduate them to a different place. The money issue, Commissioner Pryor brought up about the 1%. I think he said somebody told you, there's not enough money. There's never going to be enough money to address homelessness. Even that we can spend that $5 million you're talking about, Commissioner O'Keefe, and it still not be enough money. Do I believe that we could commit more? I think with a partnership of the two, when we have more to commit, right, we saw the results of what we committed, right? When we had more to commit, the results came and the numbers lowered because we received money from the federal government and other places that allowed us to commit more dollars. But I think the thing we have to consider here as we talk about 1% or any increase is the different issues that we have. We have a homeless issue, 1%. Let's say we do 1% there. We have a gun violence issue. Let's say we do 1% there. We have a affordable housing issue. Let's say we do 1% there. We could commit that 1% to any of those three things and be justified in being able to do so. Do I think we could do more? Yes, I think we could do more. But we just looked at a budget, Mr. Administrator, and the what was the initiative? Not the initiative, but the thing the state was messing around with. The FRS issue did pass, and we're going to look at having to do some things there that may make us have to adjust the budget that we have. So as we consider this, more money could help, of course, because we've seen the results of more money. But balance that with other budgetary constraints that we have and other issues that we have to be concerned about. Because Commissioner Pryor, I've also heard you talk about us looking at 1% for CHSP as a whole, and looking at investing 1% of county dollars in that. So more money is always helpful, but we balance that with, again, all the other issues that we may have to deal with as a county. The joint workshop idea, we've done it once. We saw some results, but it was during the time that we had the extra dollars. Now that we're kind of at a baseline, do we want to sit down and look at what we're doing in our respective camps, city and county, and see now that we don't have the extra dollars to be able to commit, comparing those to what we're both doing and seeing where the synergies lie, or even getting a report back from staff to talk about, okay, this is what the city's doing, this is what the county's doing. Is it worthy of us right now looking at how we sit down again, have another conversation with the budget that we have, not including extra dollars that we may have coming in from other places. So this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. I think all the points the commissioners brought up are on point. I think, again, the median thing for me, Commissioner Minor, I get where you're coming from with that, but I'm ready to go with it as it is. Maybe we have some rewording by the county attorney, but it's more of a safety issue with me because I've seen what happens when you got kids out there trying to, not panhandle, but just, trying to get money to go out of town on a trip or money for uniforms and stuff like that. And it gets real dangerous in those medians for those children. and washing cars, all that good stuff, trying to get people, direct people to different places to wash cars. I love the idea of the sign in the middle that says, give to, Big Bend Continuum Care or Kearney Center and other places to address homelessness. I do like that. I think that's a good idea for us to move forward with. So that concludes my comments. I have Commissioner Proctor. It is 3:35, Commissioner. We've chewed on this for about two and a half hours now. What I'm looking to do now is look for someone to make a motion, and then we can go from the motion to some kind of discussion.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. If it's my turn, I think Commissioner Minor was fumbling with it a little bit, that motion, and I'm okay with his efforts if he's heard the input of each of us, points of what we. I was wondering, Mr. Chairman, would you consider it robbery, given the array of seasoned veterans in human services at this table, if there were any outstanding burning highlights that they would offer and share? I know Shinkton was the designated voice for all of them, but I mean, is it too much to hear if they dare?
Yes, sir. Is there anything from anybody at the table, given the conversation and discussion by the commissioners, that you would like to add to the conversation?
With just all due respect to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Your work.
Okay, good. It's working. I would just like to say that in the planning for affordable housing, that there be a lot of consideration given to safe, affordable housing for families, for women with children. There's a real shortage of that across our area. We see a lot of people that get into cycles of violence through poverty, through having to move into neighborhoods where there's lots of high crime rates. So if we can just think in terms of our planning of designating some space to those families that maybe are leaving emergency shelter and moving into their own places, that it be something that is created with safety in mind.
Very good. Are there others who had points? You veterans, you know what the work is.
Commissioner Proctor, thank you for that question. And I will just ditto really what Emily said. And Commissioner Cummings really tugged at my heartstrings, because that's where I see the gap with those parents that are really trying to protect their children and keep them from the dependency situation that they might encounter. They're living in their cars, they're living in unsafe places. And I think that's where I would like to see us focus a lot of our energies, because Emily is right. We see those moms, especially with multiple children living in cars. The kids are still going to school. They're still trying to feed the children. And I think that is a gap that we see from an immediate shelter, and then also an opportunity for affordable housing. So I'd like to see us focus on that. And certainly I think, Shinkton's proposal has given us all the opportunity to potentially,
Super.
apply for those funds going forward. So I'd like to see us focus on the families.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to give just a little bit of input. I echo everything that Emily and Gwen said. At Ability First, we focus on individuals experiencing disabilities, and that really does include mental health challenges. I will just share that we had a mom come to our office who was living out of her car, who had substance abuse issues, had been evicted, had a child with a disability, had a little girl who was essentially acting as the mom. And she got a hold of my cell phone number after we were trying to help her, but she just felt like she kept reaching dead ends in our community. Not our fault, just because of the time constraints that it takes to get someone housed. She said, "Miss Mandy, what is the most friendly area in this country that I can drive to for a single mom to house my kids and raise them in a safe place?" And I really didn't have an answer for her. And we've since lost contact with her, and I would hate to see that happen again. So thank you so much for your consideration on this issue. We live it every day, and I can tell that you all care very much about our community.
say something. First of all, thank you. And of course, we all work together all the time. So I do want to say that our services are specific to women that are homeless and pregnant. But every day I encounter phone calls from women with children that do not have housing, affordable housing. So I would like for it to be addressed further. And I think that this report is very comprehensive.
Sheriff.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Shington, for hearing this compassion and this willingness to work together. I also want to extend this opportunity to appreciate our sheriff and his compassion as well, because he said on the onset, we cannot arrest our way out of this. And the host deputies have done a tremendous job. You see them here because they've been listening and wanted to hear, because we've been hearing the stories as well about what they're doing on the streets. And the great part about it with the street outreach team and the host deputies, and that is it has now spread to the other deputies. They're now calling, they're now reaching out. So we do need the funding for additional, but I think the philosophy of it all and hearing and seeing the other deputies and make a difference there, because we hear the stories, we see the numbers and the data. And one of the things the sheriff wanted everyone to know that he does not want the criminalization of the poor, of the mental issues, of mental cases out there, and as well as the homeless. He does stand behind whatever we can do for safety and to make sure that those persons that are out on the street are safe and those persons in the vehicles are safe. So when we read the 185 pages, it was very good and comprehensive, and we really do appreciate the work that's been done. And then I really do appreciate our deputies as well for the work they've done. It's been great. Thank you for this.
Very good.
Hello. Most of you have heard of Hope Community. We are Family Promise of the Big Bend. Most of you know us by Big Bend Homeless Coalition. So we do operate the emergency shelter, which is a 146-bed facility. And like Shington did mention, I think, or Jana, we are full to capacity every night. We are housing families. We're having to also turn people away. We do have a waiting list that we have. Last I checked, it was about 50 to 75 families that are waiting to be housed. We do try to incorporate those with minor children, especially infants. This morning, there was a family in the waiting area with an infant that looks to be about 2 to 3 months old. So we are doing our best to house these families. So I do appreciate anything that you can do to help the emergency shelter. We also have 3 apartment complexes that we house individuals. They are on Balkan Road. One is on Patrick Avenue, and the veterans community is on Stuckey. So I appreciate any assistance or any funding that you can do to help us continue to house, especially families here in Leon County. Thank you.
Go ahead. They told me I can't preach. Commissioners, thank you so much for today. Thank you for listening to our concerns. Shington and I don't always agree. It's a very healthy relationship. I'm not a yes man. I think that's why we get along so well, because we bounce those ideas off each other. When he came with this proposal, I agreed with every one of his topics, 100%. I thought it was very well thought out. I thought it was very thought out for not only addressing the issues for our clients, for our shelters, but also for our community and for being a citizen of Leon County. That's important to me. I am very passionate about what I do every day. Very passionate about the people I serve. It not as many children as we're 18 and above, but I do have a lot of youth running around there at times, and a lot of elderly, a lot of individuals with severe disabilities. And it's my job every day to do my very best for them, to protect them, to make the best policy decisions in our shelter for them. And I'm asking you that when you go back and you consider what Shington's presented you, to take that same stance as doing what's best for this community, because they are part of our community. They are citizens. And I pray and I hope that you will take these considerations seriously and pass them, because I think they actually would be effective. Thank you for your time.
Madam Chair, I thank you for allowing the voices of these experts and servants, public servants in our community to say and to us to hear their hearts. Truly, we say to you, and I can say that in the rhythm of meetings and as workshops and meetings occur, this has been one of the most compassionate, heartfelt moments ever. And I know that there are 7 hearts. Their doors are open. I can feel it on this dais. I feel it on this dais. But the question of Dr. King's last book, 7, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And it's a great starting point on this issue. Where do we go from here? And commissioners of all of the lines that were offered in this abundant report, over on page 30, Madam Chair, these words stick with me and have been the axle which the rest of my thoughts rotate. The Kearney Center, Hope Community and Capital City Youth Services shelters, that's under number 7, point number 7 that you mentioned, Commissioner Minor. However, the emergency shelters often share that the current level of funding is not sufficient to address significant budget deficits at the shelters for staffing, case management, and other operations necessary to assist homeless individuals and families secure permanent housing. Therefore, the emergency shelter providers have requested that the county and city consider dedicated line item funding for such programs consistent with the federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness. And we were prevented with the federal strategic plan to prevent homelessness. As I was looking at that and listening to you, Commissioner Cummings, and of the most unaffordable communities, you said California, and I believe over on page 54 of this report, 16 out of the 20 cities in America that were unaffordable housing costs is in California. That's why you saw those people. Biden got it in this report. Of the 20 communities out of 20, 10 out of 20, that there's a correlation between housing costs and homelessness, 10 of the communities in California. And there are only 2 East Coast states in these rankings, only 2. That's amazing. They done told us. Shankton done gave us the data. Question, where do we go from here? Commissioners, I believe where we go from here. If we have not the temerity of heart and mind to look at that 1%, let's be men and women and give this issue to our citizens as a referendum item, or whether this community would constrain us to place 1% as a floor amount to address these issues that we've heard. I know it's hard, difficult in some of your cases to make up your minds or make up your hearts as to what's right. Let's not make up our hearts nor our minds. Let's let the community make up theirs. We saw the support that the CSC got. Made the case, community, would you designate a penny for children and their mothers, families who can't see, who don't get enough to eat, don't see the doctor, this calamity and the other. I'm willing to say that as a policy matter, let's allow our community to determine whether 1% of our budget, county budget, year after year, if 1% is too much to tithe to the least of our community. Can we tithe 1% of the public dollar? That could be a measure. for the city. It could be a measure of voting referendum for the county. As elected officials, we may not have the wherewithal. But let's let the community decide. Seldom do you feel the air of compassion combined as it is in the room today. And I know that Commissioner O'Keefe's comments are a part of mine to take buildings, to give tax breaks for properties that are turned over for the purposes of addressing homelessness. How do we secure, incentivize empty buildings, empty hotels, empty rental places, and incentivize them to be relinquished to the spheres of oversight for homelessness? And then it occurs to me, commissioners, as a policy matter, I think Commissioner Maddox, our chairman, said that you could take 1% and address youth, you get 1% and address this, 1% and address. Yeah, you can do that. But I am willing to see us acquire homelessness as a division directly under the guidance of the Board of County Commissioners. I mean, this is serious for all the right reasons. It's a moral issue. It's a social issue. It's about our ethics. All of those things. Why not make homelessness under the direct auspices of our county? We don't have any agency which we're directly engrossed with. But when you look at some of these cities, like what you saw in California, until you go around in these communities where homelessness is shown up out there, over the top. And I think that when we put the Board of County Commissioners, that this one reports directly to us, okay? And if Shinkton is the point guard or whomever, but this issue ought to be, and I offer it as a suggestion, to lift it and to give it the prominence which richly it deserves. And then finally, commissioners, I share and say to us that kudos to the host deputy unit, that you've done everything to decriminalize what normatively would be a perception of homelessness as also being something to do with criminality. Homelessness alone is not criminality. And to hear Assistant Sheriff Gilmore say that what you're doing has become infectious across the sheriffs is great. That's awesome. But from what our vice chair said, people defecating and doing this, and that, we can't tolerate such irregular behavior in the doorsteps of businesses and blah, blah, blah. We got to keep this community tight and right. We got to ride herd where we have to ride herd, but without the heavy hand of law enforcement. And then Commissioner Minor, I think, point about the panhandling and ordinances. You raised number 4, and people standing in the middle of the road. And in preparing for today's meeting, I made notations to myself that when July 1 comes, I think that the new gun laws are going to probably clear out most of the people standing in the lane. Because if you approach me and don't look right, I'm prepared to defend myself. And I think that after July 1 here in Florida, a number of people are going to get off the center, medium, and the side of the road. Because if stand your ground means anything, all I have to do is be in fear, to be fearful of someone approaching me, and I'm good. So it's my thought that before we go digging up ordinances, I think nature, in the course of nature, is going to handle those things in a new kind of way. Thank you all for this look. Thank you all, staff, all of you, for affording us. Thank you, community, for the support everyone who has patiently dealt with. And as Commissioner O'Keefe has said, I doubt if there's one person in here whose family member in some way is not affected by one of the categories mentioned in all of this information. And I know that I too place my credit card on this dais to say that my family is impacted by a plethora of what has been lifted up. So commissioners, I suggest that Commissioner Minor has made, and I think he was trying to tabulate a motion, and I'd be willing to hear which way he goes and all the things that we've said, including a referendum item for the community to determine if they would constrain the county commission to a full 1% of our budget to support these matters of desperation, human desperation, such as homelessness. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor, for those comments, and we certainly appreciate our panelists, our host deputies, and those that are present in the back for all that you have done to address this issue, which is it's not an easy issue, and I think we've all recognized that. But thank you all again, Shankton, for your leadership. Ms. Hunter, for your leadership. We just appreciate you. Now, commissioners, Commissioner Proctor has raised some issues regarding to all the recommendations. I believe we have 8 recommendations by staff, and I believe item number 4 asks for some direct funding, but he's raised the issue about 1% of the county's budget being dedicated to the issue of the homeless. Our chair indicated that, and I know we've had a homeless workshop with the city. It might have been perhaps last year, maybe year before, but our chair raised the issue of perhaps having another workshop in conjunction with the city. And I'm not sure if that is the consent of the panel, what your thoughts are on that, or the 8 items that are in our recommendation. Do we want to take them one by one with any as a group? We want to take them as a group or one by one with any modification to each one specifically?
Just to clarify,
Commissioner O'Keefe, did you have?
I think for the most part, as one, there might be one we carve out, and I'm ready to make a motion if that's okay. I don't know where I'm in the queue.
Okay. And before we do that, can I ask the county administrator if you want to weigh in on Commissioner Proctor's recommendation of 1% of the budget being dedicated to trying to alleviate the homeless issue in the city?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think obviously the timing is good. As you all know, we're right in the middle of our budget process. So one of the things I'd like to do is and we can do this through the ratification of this workshop, is to provide you the information on that. I think the board, sometimes we forget, the board has exercised a tremendous amount of leadership on this issue and has dedicated substantial funding. I think we're very close to that number currently. So again, I think we can ratify that. When we bring back the ratification, we can clarify that. And so outside of that, of course, we would receive any additional direction that you might have. But I think we're very close to that number currently.
Thank you, Mr. County Administrator. Are there any other comments from commissioners? If not, I will entertain a motion to accept the ratification, the recommendations, and if there are any modifications to each one, we can carve that recommendation out. And the ones that are not controversial, we can accept those. I'm sorry.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Commissioner O'Van.
Commissioner Cummings, I'm ready to make a motion.
Absolutely. Do you have a comment, Commissioner Minor?
Before, though, I'm prepared to make a motion for staff options 1 through 8. I would like to look at and hear out Commissioner Minor's alternative to option 4. And then additionally, I do want to add an option as well. So, County Attorney, would that be considered board direction for option 9 or, okay. So, really quick, Commissioner Minor, I want to hear your alternative, if that's okay.
Well, no. Hold on just a minute. Did you make a motion?
Okay.
So we need a
Yes,
second
ma'am.
before
Yes,
you
ma'am.
do
So
that.
I'll make a motion for option 9, board direction. And with that, I wanted to include staff recommendations 1 through 8. Additionally, I want to propose an item into that, and it's a public safety measure, and would love to hear my colleagues' feedback on this, but it's in regards to camping. For me, when I think about where people are sleeping and camping on a day-to-day basis in public places, and I think about kids in my district who already have a lack of accessibility getting to and from school with sidewalks. I can't sleep at night and I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if a child sidestepped a sidewalk, stepped into the road, and got hit by a car because an individual was sleeping on the sidewalk. I do believe we have an obligation to all the residents of Leon County for basic care and shelter, but also an obligation to our youth and also individuals who are camping. Therefore, I would like to include as an option to have staff bring back an agenda item for a complete staff analysis for alternative sleeping locations for people who are sleeping in public places and what that fiscal impact would be.
All right, so that's 8.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and then for clarification, you're moving options 1 through 8, and you're adding option 9, is that correct?
Essentially, it's board direction, but including staff recommendations 1 through 8 with an additional item added to it.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, discussion.
I don't want to interrupt you. Just if I could get just clarification on Commissioner Caban's addition. Is this a policy recommendations or was there some accommodation? It was just a little unclear on the.
I want staff to run a staff analysis for alternative sleeping locations for people who are sleeping in any public spaces and what that fiscal impact would be.
Thank you. I got
Is that clear enough, Mr. County Administrator?
Alternative locations.
Sleeping location.
Fiscal impact. Thank you. Got it.
Is discussion. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Commissioner Caban, thank you very much for making that motion. I wonder if you'd be willing to accept a friendly amendment to option 4, which is really just an elaboration of a conversation that I had with our county attorney earlier today, in order to make sure that whatever ordinance comes back to us that has legal sufficiency, that withstands scrutiny. I think that agenda item coming back to us in the draft ordinance should also include data that shows from a safety perspective that the ordinance that we're trying to pass is justified. For example, in my conversation with the county attorney, and please correct me if I'm mischaracterizing this in any way, but based on my understanding of the legal issue here, we could have a legal challenge to an ordinance that we come in and we adopt without empirical data justifying what the ordinance is about. We can say it feels like it's going to be safer by having this ordinance, but it's going to be much stronger from a legal standpoint if we have data along with that agenda item to support that. So all I'm asking for in this friendly amendment is within this draft ordinance agenda item coming back, we have supportive data that supports the ordinance that we are contemplating.
Okay, so I'd be willing to accept that amendment, but I want to provide you some information that I received from LCSO prior to this meeting. In 2020, overall vehicle crashes involving pedestrians was 205. In 2021, overall crashes involving pedestrians was 185. In 2022, overall crashes involving pedestrians was 209. So combined over the last 3 years, we've had vehicle on pedestrian accidents, over 600 crashes.
Yeah, and thank you. And we've heard some of that data from the CRTPA.
Okay.
We've heard some of those numbers, but I think in terms of making this withstand any legal scrutiny, I think it's very important for us to have a breakdown of that, perhaps even looking at some of the key intersections that we have. I think that's going to be really important.
Could you specify exactly what it is, and I'd be willing to include it in the motion? Exact verbiage for staff.
Yeah, sure. So the friendly amendment would be for option number 4, keeping that title as the same, but adding to that some supportive data of traffic safety, traffic volume to help us justify the ordinance that we are contemplating.
Okay, I'd be willing to accept that.
Commissioner Proctor, would you accept that amendment? I believe you second the motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And then the last part I have, Madam Chair, is on option number 7. Commissioner Proctor mentioned the 1% fixed amount.
Yes, sir.
As a guideline. He may be right. I don't know if that amount is the best, most appropriate amount for us to fund. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. I think what we probably need to recognize is that the big elephant in the room is lack of funding. Lack of funding for affordable housing, lack of funding for mental health, lack of funding for emergency shelter operations. We just underwent in the last several months a big concern that we had at the legislature with the FRS legislation. We thought at one point that was going to cost the county an additional $14 million. Fortunately, that did not pass the legislature. We do know that the resulting bill that did pass and is being signed by the governor is an impact of $3 million, which is still a lot of money. It's going to be a very difficult budget year coming up. But the fact remains, our success when it comes to reducing homelessness in Leon County depends on funding. And so what I'd like to do is, again, with your possible exception of this friendly amendment, is for option number 7, and I'm sorry, option number 6, because it pertains to fiscal year 24. Ask county staff, in conjunction with our budget review, the next step of our budget review, to take a look at other options to increase the funding from $500,000 to another amount. Giving our county staff the ability to take a look at what flexibility there might be to increase that amount for fiscal year 24. For fiscal year 25, which is option number 7, we may need to think about what type of funding we might need going forward, but let's take a look at the immediate need, which is fiscal year 24. So, in summary, my friendly amendment to you, I hope you'll accept, is for option 7, ask county staff, in conjunction with our upcoming budget reviews, to take a look at what we might be able to do to increase funding for fiscal year 24 for emergency services.
So, Commissioner Minor, are you asking for an agenda item to come back? Are you asking for an agenda item?
Well, yes. I mean, it's going to come back to us. Yes, I'm asking for an agenda item. And
on 7. Okay.
On number 6. I misspoke. It is number 6 because that pertains to fiscal year 24.
Okay. Commissioner Proctor, are you okay with that?
Yes, if included in its coming back, that we will review 2 points. The first being that we consider a referendum for the public to vote on 1% tithing. The second being an arrangement. I'm gonna talk to y'all in a minute. Hold on. The other one being that we would place housing, homelessness directly under the Board of County Commissioners, and what that could look like in terms of its emphasis in amplifying this call toward human desperation and ending it.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. So that would be the amendment to number 7. Are you okay with number 6? I saw 6 as 7. Are you okay with the language about staff coming back, including looking at a referendum for county employees? I'm sorry, for county residents to consider the 1%.
I'm hoping Commissioner Proctor would allow us to keep those different friendly amendment proposals separate. Let's take them one at a time, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for the sake of this motion, I would agree. I think there's a lot of moving parts, and I think if we could fine tune what it is for the motion, I think would help.
And we could take Commissioner Proctor's separate under board direction, which is an option that we have. So let's exclude number 6, Commissioner Proctor, if you're okay. Your amendment to number 6, if we can exclude that and just take that as an item by itself.
Sure.
Okay.
So I guess for the sake of this, for the motion that's on the floor is the motion I made with an amendment from you, Commissioner Minor. And you're going to save that point, I guess, for a separate motion after the motion on the floor. Is that correct?
I mean, it could be included, excluded. However, I just wanted to make sure that when staff was looking at it, that the recommendation consistent with the elephant, was it the elephant or gorilla in the room? Which one? Both of them kind of big, you know.
Well, let's just
either one of them.
Let's do it separate. We'll come back. We'll vote on Commissioner Caban's motion with the amendments from Commissioner Minor.
Madam Chair.
And then we'll come back to your recommendation, Commissioner Proctor, and that would just be a separate motion. Commissioner
Madam Chair,
Minor.
just
yes.
to clarify, there was actually 2 friendly amendments that I proposed to Commissioner Caban. He accepted the first one regarding option 4. He still needs to decide on whether or not he'd like to accept the second one regarding option 6.
That was my original question. Could you spell that out exactly?
Yes. So regarding option 6, which deals with fiscal year 24 funding from the county for emergency shelter operations, what I'm asking you to consider accepting is having an agenda item come back during our budget review process, perhaps, whatever is most convenient for staff, having us take a look at other options of additional funding in addition to the $500,000 that would allow us to provide more resources for emergency center operations for our Big Bend COC partners and other nonprofits. So
just an agenda item.
Just an agenda item.
Yeah.
It could be in conjunction with our next budget review when we add, because we have to go through the process. So
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
And it's not rejecting staff's recommendation, it's just expanding it, asking them to look at other options.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other clarification? All those in favor?
Discussion?
Yes, Commissioner O'Keefe.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you. I know we've been here a long time. These are all important, great ideas, and I know a number of us have other ideas in addition to staff that we want to bring. And so I really think that what's great about what staff provided is that these are all actionable items that all the groups have agreed upon, and I would hate to imperil those with additional things that we're adding. And so ideally, I would like us to vote on staff items up or down, and then we add our own things, just so that in what we come up with, we don't sink the great work staff has done, which is ready to go. I mean, we're talking about we approve it, and in 2 or 3 weeks, we're getting applications for stuff, and we're getting stuff in the summer. And so, and that even includes that I'm opposed to some of these recommendations, for example, bringing back an ordinance, but for the sake of orderliness, I am, and again, not ignoring that we all have things we think we should add and are good ideas, I think we can save those for following motions so we don't sink the good work of staff. And so I'm going to make a substitute motion that we accept staff recommendations with the exception of modifying number 6 to have staff bring back options for more funding than we are allocating in this option.
That was my amendment.
That was your amendment. And to incorporate option 4, bringing back data to support lawful ordinance.
That was my other friend.
Exactly.
That's his motion.
And so the substitute motion I'm making is all of staff recommendations with no additions, and Commissioner Minor's bring data with number 4 and ask staff to offer more money if they can find it for number 6.
Thank you, Commissioner
Discussion.
O'Keefe. Is there a second to his motion, first of all, to his substitute? Motion dies for lack of second. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that we need to make clear is that we don't have to bald-face embrace staff's recommendations. We have as much, in fact, we have more right to make recommendations or to augment and tweak recommendations from the staff. So with what we have spiced and added a little bit more, our views are valid, and we don't have to make independent of our staff. They've made some suggestions, they've reviewed, a lot of people have talked, but the last word is ours, in particular the funding, if we do that. And as has been mentioned, I don't know if it was a big bear or what was in the room, but funding or the lack of funding is still the problem here. And it's my hope that consistent with the Presbyterian Church community, asking, and should I address that in a different motion? I understand, but I'd like to deal with that at the conclusion of whatever the vote is here.
We have a motion on the floor. Any other comments? All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Any opposition?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe. One opposition. Thank you so much, Commissioner. And let me say this too before we move on, Commissioner Okay, I think what you proposed was actually the motion that was pending on the floor.
It was not. It does not. I am absolutely opposed to considering camping ordinances and spending significant staff time. That's why I voted no. But the motion has passed and
Okay,
moved on.
thank you so much. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, before us, Presbyterian Church, under the name of Debbie Gibson, I believe, has offered to us their recommendations, calling for a task force to look at coming up with a 10-year plan. The city, county jointly to authorize citizens to look, blah, blah, blah. You got it. I would like to ask a more strenuous look coming from our staff as to how we can accommodate these rich and needed recommendations so that it wouldn't be redundant to other matters in motion. Allow staff to craft from these those new points which augment and expand the reach of what we're doing in homelessness, and that we're not redundant. So I'd like to submit these to our staff for their deepest consideration to also bring back.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Is there a second for discussion? Thank you, Commissioner Wells. And might I, Shinkton, I'm not sure if you all have this. Let me give you a copy of it. This is what. Okay.
Okay. And then I know that that's a motion. And did we incorporate staff coming back with a potential referendum for the public to decide? Okay, we need a motion on that one after this right here, Madam Chair.
So are you making two separate?
Two separate, yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can bring that motion about the referendum after we address this.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have a second. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Minor.
Real quick, Commissioner Proctor, I think what is here on this sheet of paper, I think is definitely worthy. My main concern is that we don't recreate the wheel, and that any commission or any body of people that are organized is integrated closely with the Big Bend COC, with Shinkton and the county, just so we don't have to re-research a lot of the work that's already been done. There's been a tremendous amount of work already with input from partners as well as the public, and Shinkton's been working really well with within the county too. So I would just, you don't need to change. I wouldn't recommend changing your motion, sir, but rather just making sure that we emphasize that there's a lot of synergy to be gained from the work that's already been taking place.
Exactly.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Keefe, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I had a question on the motion. I like all of these ideas except for the one where it specifies creating a task force. And am I correct that is part of the motion? Is the creating a task force item?
Opening paragraph. Yeah, the opening paragraph asks the city and county to consider this task force that would come up with a 10-year plan. Not them, but something under the auspices of us. That's the opening graph.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Keefe. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition?
Aye.
One opposition. Thank you, Commissioner, so much. Now, Commissioner Proctor, do
Yes,
you want
Madam
to
Chair,
address
I know the hours draws.
Sir?
I know the hour draws nigh, but thank you for affording me one final, and that is that that this board allows our staff and for us to consider a potential for crafting a dedicated source at 1% of the county's budget toward homelessness and the myriad issues that have been raised today. There's just been a variety of those things. So, and if it's something that we ourselves are not comfortable with, that we would allow staff to craft a voter referendum for 2024, and we ask the community, is homelessness a big deal to them, and is it big enough to them that we should commit 1%? I think it's well worth the public's input.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Caban.
Commissioner Proctor, I'd be open to this discussion, especially come back as agenda item, but I just want to emphasize that I would like to, if we're going to go that route, that it's an allocation of moving money within the budget rather than seeing a tax increase.
No, it's not a new penny. No.
Yeah.
No. It's not new.
Okay.
It's not CSC type. This is merely to say within the monies that we receive, that 1%, we would figure out how to.
So an allocation of the already existing budget.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Commissioner Welch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. County Administrator, are we asking for an agenda item to come back, sort of analyzing maybe what we're already spending and how it approximates to 1%? And is that something that could be even put on a ballot to just ask that question?
Sure.
I understand what's being asked. Is that doable?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple things. Yes, we're already going to bring back to you what we're currently doing budgetarily, and we're happy to do that. Also, I should probably note, too, in case it was lost, I'm sure that it wasn't. Just the very substantial recommendations that are before you today, I think are approaching about $2 million, just not that it's enough, but it's substantial. Obviously, we've got the additional direction relative to option 6 to come back to you, relative to a referendum issue. And I hear what Commissioner Proctor is saying. But just to reiterate, generally you would go to the voters on a referendum to identify a dedicated funding source that is available to you as a local option in statutes. That is not the case here. There's not an available local option to you. What I think Commissioner Proctor is saying, you can certainly clarify, is to get some sort of temperature check with the voters on something that you're already authorized to do without voter approval. Obviously, this board has all the authority to dedicate whatever percentage you determine without a referendum, without voter authorization. So it sounds like some sort of a non-binding sort of a referendum to the community. Again, to go to a referendum, normally what you'd be doing is seeking a bond financing, a general obligation bond. You would be seeking a local option dedicated revenue. I understand none of those are on the table right now. But it sounds like, again, just for clarification, that you'd be putting something on a referendum for something that you already have authority to do.
Yeah, but what we're saying, Commissioner, is simply if we're too timid of ourselves and we need the voters to push us in the back, then let them push us. That's all I'm trying to say. We don't want to do it of ourselves, and we need them to tell us, please tell us, so we can justify.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. So part of the analysis from staff, Mr. County Administrator, will be in fact addressing those options. Am I correct?
Yes, and again, we've already got the direction to bring you back a budget discussion item, which would bring you what we're currently doing, which I believe combined with the authorization that we've already received today, including the line item funding and some of the other things, we're probably, if not there, very close to that number to begin with. But again, happy to receive whatever additional direction that you might have.
I think we've got clarity on it. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye. 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 Any opposition? Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Thank you, Mr. County Administrator. Is there any other? I believe we've accepted with some modifications all the recommendations from staff. Thank you all so much for your hard work. Is there anything else? Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I would like to make a motion based on our prior discussion that staff bring back an agenda item for a method to consider creating a method to expunge eviction records for individuals in Leon County from their record, and I'll just do that. I'll do them one by one. I move that staff bring back an agenda item on how we can create a method for individuals to expunge evictions from their record in Leon County.
I'll second that, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got a motion and a second, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear, we are clear. You wanted an agenda item to expunge specifically eviction records, is that correct? Just eviction records.
An agenda item from staff for people to expunge their eviction record, for which there is no way currently.
Okay. Any other discussion? Commissioner Minor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner O'Keefe, would you accept just a friendly amendment just to include any other examples throughout the state that might exist? If they don't, that's fine, but if basically adding...
Yes. Accepted.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, exclude. I didn't understand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, my question for Commissioner O'Keefe is if he would be willing to allow a friendly amendment to add to his motion to include other examples from around the state that might be similar to the policy that is being considered.
Of the examples of eviction.
If there are any, to include some examples from around the state that might have already been in practice.
Okay. Commissioner Caban.
County Attorney, do we have the jurisdiction and the authority as policymakers to do that, or is that a state attorney related, I guess, item?
That's something that we would really have to explore. Evictions are a civil matter, not a criminal matter. So it wouldn't fall under the state attorney's jurisdiction at all, but it certainly would involve court's jurisdiction and the court process. So we would need to really look at what that process would entail and what role the county could play in the process, but we would not run that process.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Madam County Attorney. And in bringing that agenda item back, I'm sure staff will explore, any legal ramifications, what we can or cannot do on that item. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Any opposition? Thank you so much. Are there any?
My final motion. Final motion.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Finally. I move that we ask staff to bring back an agenda item evaluating converting suitable Leon County-owned facilities that are not used otherwise to be converted to permanent supportive housing, and that if not already in our policy, to pursue federal funding to turn vacant and unused buildings like hotels, retail spaces into permanent supportive housing via seeking federal funding or other sources of funding.
Is there a second?
A second.
Is there any discussion?
Commissioner O'Keefe, I have would you be willing to amend your motion? I had a note in here that as part of the motion to look at alternative housing solutions, we direct staff to further work with, because I know the relationship is already there, and they've done a great job, but further work with the city of Tallahassee to identify pieces of property in the urban services area that they could rezone for dense housing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, there's a friendly amendment. Commissioner Welch, are you okay with that amendment?
I think Commissioner
sorry.
Caban made the second, I think.
Okay.
Oh, you did the second. I'm sorry. Are you?
Yes.
Well, you're amending it,
Yes.
so. And you're okay with his amendment. Okay, any discussion? I think staff is pretty clear on the agenda item to come back. And of course, all of this is directly related to trying to alleviate the homelessness issue in our community. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passed. Thank you so much, commissioners. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Again, I want to thank all of our partners, all of you all, for all the work that you all do to address this issue. And I know that we will be coming back. We will see you all again. Shinkton, thank you for your good work. Thank our county attorney for providing us legal direction. Thank our county administrator. Thank the audience for coming, because I know you all are just as interested in this issue in our community as we are. So thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.